we do have a long agenda, so I will get us going. Councillor Butler will join us, and perhaps is joined already. I'll call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for June 1st, 2021. As I said, we have a very full agenda today. However, before we begin, I ask that we do pause to solemnly acknowledge the memory of the 215 Indigenous children whose remains were discovered at the Kamloops Residential School, to honor their families and to acknowledge our role in addressing this national tragedy as we strive to achieve a more inclusive society free of hate and oppression. I will take us now to the orders of the day, approval of the agenda. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Right, if not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as provided? Councillor McGrath, thank you. All in favor? I am just waiting to, there's Councillor Butler. I'm going to assume that Councillor Butler is in favor of that motion. I will say it is carried in any event and won't call for opposition. The minutes of the regular meeting of May 18th have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 18th, 2021 as circulated or as presented? Councillor Demota, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have 4 presentations scheduled for this morning, which is a lot. So I asked those later on the list to be patient. We try to provide 15 minutes, but that will be subject to questions as well. So we'll see where that takes us. But we will begin with a Jasper Police update from Sergeant Rick Bedesi, who I now know is the telephone caller. So Sergeant Bedesi, welcome, and go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, and members of Council, CEO Mr. Given, and other attendees on the meeting. I know that, as indicated by yourself, the itinerary is full, so I'll try to address the issues. This is basically a snapshot of comparative from last fiscal year and what we're anticipating for our plans for the new fiscal year starting April 21st and ending in March of 2022. We selected 2 initiatives based on the fact that as the COVID environment unfolds, we started to see a pattern of increased calls for service, and that's basically traffic safety. In the last, since April and into May, we fielded numerous calls on a daily basis for careless, dangerous driving on the highway, road rage related incidents, and we decided that our other areas of frequent calls for service, which was reduced in 2020, more in part because of the COVID regulations, which were calls for public intoxication, disturbances, assaults. We will focus now on traffic safety and community engagement as we start seeing that reopening phase of COVID regulations being reduced. We did note recently in the last 3 or 4 weeks as the increase in visitation occurred, and it's expected. The calls, unfortunately, for domestic violence calls have started to increase, not significantly, but there is a deviation from what we had seen over the last quarter of the tail end of the fiscal year. Having said that, we have continued to focus on the calls that are predominantly concerning, and that's on the highways. And so we have started enforcement initiatives. Over the long weekend, there were a total of 146 violation tickets issued on Highway 16, 93, and 93A, 131 for speed, and along with the 146, 13 warnings were issued, written warnings. We concentrated part of that efforts on Connaught Street at the new 30-kilometer zone, and 9 violation tickets were issued for speed over the 30-kilometer zone, including additional warnings and cautions and education pieces. Continue to address road safety, traffic-related fatalities, which we had significant calls in the past years have been reduced as the reduction and increased regulations. And now that we've seen that increased visitation, that's what we are trying to address by visibility on the highway and on the major roadways that lend some concern. Calls for service to injury and property-related collisions were reduced, as indicated before. Education first, prior to enforcement, was utilized in the unfolding COVID processes during 2020. As we move forward into 21-22, and with community consultation, we have deemed traffic safety to be the unit priority. Fiscal year, the last fiscal year, as indicated, saw a reduction in persons crime, in a large part to the decrease in visitation and and COVID regulations limiting access to venues and after-hours socializing. Less calls for service have been received in the late night hours to licensed establishments, where a large number of these types of disturbances and assault type files typically stem from. And so we anticipate now with increased visitations, we may be getting additional calls for service. There's a direct correlation. As far as community engagement, we pride ourselves in the community engagement. The members are at various activities in the community, have developed relationships with community stakeholders. Myself, the unit is quite approachable and easily reached 24/7. Stakeholders are in regular contact with the detachment commander, that's myself, the Municipality of Jasper, Parks Canada, and the community business owners via the Chamber are engaged in policing models for Jasper National Park. For staffing levels at this point in time, we have 9 full-time positions for police officers, including my position, the detachment commander, an operations NCO, and 7 constables, 3 administrative staff members. The operations NCO position, which is a corporal position, is currently vacant and has been vacant since November of 2020. The promotion process has been initiated and due to the COVID situation, somewhat delayed. The process has now reached a point where the selection process is the next stage. And once I know more about this process, I'll be able to report to Council, hopefully in the next month or so. As we head into the year, I know after speaking to numerous members of the community, the big question is the detachment status, the new building next to the Sarge. I can basically, what I can say is the project is currently on hold. The architectural component is still under review. It is unknown when this review will be completed. I'm able to confirm that planning for underground utilities have been completed. And updates I will be providing when available as this project continues to evolve. Currently, there's the University of Alberta is conducting a wildlife study on the project site, and that will go well into September. And as indicated before, to culminate my presentation, in the last 3 weeks, we've noted increased calls for service, and it's based on the fact, especially since the long weekend, the increased visitation, which we expected, there's a direct correlation, and we knew that it was only a matter. Over the weekend, the unit and other emergency services unfortunately had to respond to a very tragic incident at the Columbia Icefield. However, you can say, as I always do when we navigate these situations, that our emergency services is based on experiences and training and personnel that are willing to go beyond what's expected of them. We're always successful in navigating same, and I'm heading into a critical incident stress debriefing at 10:00 hours this morning with Parks Canada's team and their personnel. And that's it for my presentation. I'm open for questioning if that's a requirement at this point in the presentation.
Thank you, Sergeant Bedesi. Just before I turn it over to councillors for any questions they may have, I just wonder about receiving a copy of your printed report. Typically, I know that you're able to provide us that. I appreciate the workload and the stress that you're under. But are you able at some point to provide to our administration a written copy of the report that we've just received, just for our records?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll provide the last quarter, and the new fiscal quarter is April to end of June, and there will be another report to accompany that quarter also.
Right. Thank you very much, Sergeant. And just as a brief aside, Council recently discussed the provincial initiative to possibly convert to a provincial police force, and I have been instructed to Council to write to the relevant ministers and to the Premier to document our support for the continuation of RCMP services in our community. We certainly appreciate what you and your team have been able to contribute to the community over the years, and we really do hope that you're able to continue. So thank you for this, all the services that you provide. And I will turn it to councillors. Any questions from councillors? Councillor McGrath? Oh, I'm sorry, that's a little head in behind you. I thought that was your finger poking up. All right. If there, Councillor Demota, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Mr. Bedesi. Sergeant Bedesi, I really, I just wanted to extend a thank you. I worked in the downtown core for pretty much most of the pandemic, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the presence of you and your fellow staff members in the community, and you know, especially in the last year. And I think that it continues to serve our community well. And you know, I appreciate the candor and the engagement of you and your officers, and the collaboration with our bylaw officers. I think we've done a great job collectively so far, and I look forward to that continued work down the road.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sergeant Bedesi. I want to echo the Mayor's comments without wanting to sound overly political. I, on behalf of the community, am very pleased that the RCMP offers our community policing, and hope to see that not change. I have one question, and that is around your comments about the complement of officers. I just want to clarify what the detachment considers to be a full complement in the community, which I think I heard you say that there are 9 full-time officers now, and we are short 1 pending that hire you referred to. So is it fair to conclude that a full complement, at least for the summer season, is 10 officers? And I wondered if there are any seasonal additions over the busy summer season. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The 9-officer contingent is based on the detachment commander position, the corporal operations, and 7 constables. Ideally, one of the points I did forget to mention was that one of the 7 constable position is currently on a graduated return to work program based on an injury. And so, to be quite honest, the on-call rotations we're not a 24-hour policing detachment. However, members are on call starting at 3, 4 in the morning, including myself. And by extension, myself, I'm also in 24/7 for serious incidents as it unfolds. So what it does when we have these shortages, it does affect the ability to have some sort of a work-life balance. And in addition to, we do meet the criteria of keeping our policing model intact. So the members step up. We offer various solutions to this problem or to this issue by reaching out to our neighboring detachments. As far away as Edson, we have one member who is currently working out of a unit in Spruce Grove. He used to be stationed here, and Constable Barubi Bourgeois, Jerome, and he, on his days off, will gladly step up and assist us with shortfalls in the scheduling. However, I'll say this with 100% confidence that we meet our policing models. Some days it does get to a point where we have to readjust on a weekly basis the scheduling to meet the objectives, but we're quite fortunate that we have a team of people that are willing to step up when required. As far as the seasonal approach goes, I think it's something we should be looking at as we go back to a point where the regulations are being lifted and the increased visitation on a daily basis. Even last year, I think I was told that although there were restrictions in place, domestic tourism actually met or surpassed a regular business summer. And this information was provided by Parks Canada. Hopefully I answered your question, Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. And just in case there was a sense that my question reflected some dissatisfaction, it doesn't at all. I was merely looking to clarify one thing that people often wonder is, well, how many officers do we typically have in Jasper? And just looking for clarification.
Absolutely, none. By no means was I indicating that. I just wanted to let you know that for some, over the years, I've been here, I'm heading into my 6th year in Jasper, and we've had the demands during the summer, especially when there was the international visitation, is pretty significant, and we would bolster our shift scheduling for long weekends, and based on calls for service from the prior week, we may even add additional crews on overtime shifts just to assist in addressing calls for service. So it's a team effort, and part of the team is definitely the municipality and all the stakeholders in the community.
Well, the ability for us to adapt to changing circumstances is much appreciated. I'll also just drop a note of appreciation for the times that I have senior officers accompanying our bylaw officers downtown, patrolling the streets, sort of help with the mask bylaw issue. It's much appreciated. We love to see officers walking around downtown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Butler and Sergeant Bedesi. I see no other hands from councillors. So again, Sergeant Bedesi, thank you very much for attending today and providing that report. We look forward to the written report, and you have another engagement you indicated to get off to, so we will free you for that with our thanks.
Thank you much. Have a wonderful day.
That takes us to agenda item 4.2, the Jasper Downtown Revitalization Study presented by Nancy Robbins, Community Futures, West Yellowhead. Welcome, Nancy.
Morning, Council. I'm calling in from our office in Hinton today and would like to respectfully acknowledge that I am on Treaty 8 territory. Well, I'm happy today to talk to you about something that's not related to COVID recovery, and which for me is a big change in the past 14 months, I can tell you that. I'm here this morning to talk about our CARES project, Downtown Revitalization. So this project began over the past year. It was part of 3 projects that was funded by CARES, the Municipality of Jasper, Yellowhead County, and Community Futures West Yellowhead. Downtown Revitalization Project was part of the Building Tourism Entrepreneurship in the West Yellowhead. And when we talk about downtown revitalization, it's important for us to realize that downtown revitalization is not just about beautification. It is about economic development and business retention, making sure that our businesses in the downtown core are healthy. It's about leadership, it's about marketing our downtown core, and it's also about physical improvements. So when we look at our downtown core over the past year, we've seen so much change. And for someone who's lived in this in Jasper for over 20 years, we've seen remarkable change in our downtown. But in the last year in particular, our downtown has been the focus of many initiatives by the municipality. And so since we began this project, there's been discussions of sidewalk seating, paid parking, and street closures, all of which impacted our project. So for the purpose of our study, we looked at downtown mainly in the commercial core that went from Hazel Avenue to Pyramid Lake Road on both Patricia and Connaught Street, and then again on Connaught Street from Mayette and Hazel as the boundary. When we look at what is in our downtown core, of course, most of our businesses are retail trade. Second to that, we have accommodations and food services. And we also have a list of other unique businesses such as general merchandise store, health and business care. We do have some gasoline stations, cannabis stores. We have one grocery store and a number of miscellaneous stores that sell different products. We have a few professional services, mostly banks, accounting, legal. We have an engineering firm downtown, a movie theater, and a few of our tour operators are also based out of the downtown core. So what we did was, as to use the phrase that everyone uses to this day, we had to pivot our project. Our intention was to have community consultations, focus groups, and face-to-face meetings, and also to meet with the businesses in a face-to-face manner. Of course, restrictions did not allow us to do that, and so we had to change the project almost on a weekly basis to reach our goals for what we wanted to accomplish. So we surveyed businesses. We had 92 businesses complete our survey. 75 to 74% of those were in the downtown core. And what we did see was that businesses want to maintain what they're doing for the next 3 years. There's not much discussion of growth or expansion at this present time, and that's understandable considering the economic crisis that we're in. Most of the surveys really look to community events and festivals as a way to revitalize downtown. And we also asked about the pilot project for the sidewalk closures to people expand their businesses. And we do have some recommendations about that. Majority of businesses do appreciate the sidewalk closures and did talk about what influence that had on their business. Parking is a very big concern. for the businesses in the downtown core. And when we asked if they would benefit from any kind of programming, we asked about business grants and loans, or beautification grants and loans, marketing assistance, cooperative marketing, and networking events. We also did ask the question of businesses, what would you like to see in the downtown core? And we got some really interesting responses. That was an open-ended question. And we got some really unique, creative ideas. Things like pop-up stores, which we are seeing growing in the West Yellowhead, were mentioned quite a bit, as well as different ways that we can introduce public art and artisans to the downtown. We don't see a lot of that right now, and we don't have compared to a lot of other downtowns that have the volume of people that the Jasper downtown has, beautification in terms of public art, bike racks, those kinds of things were mentioned by businesses. Overall, people feel very safe in our downtown, which was something that was very reassuring. Seniors and a lot of business owners and residents do feel that mobility is not an issue for downtown, that people can get around quite easily. And the thing that makes downtown is that it's downtown. We have a very unique culture to the downtown core in our area. And also the look and the feel of it feels really good for people. We had 292 residents also complete the resident survey because we wanted to know what residents had to say. A lot of residents did talk about why they didn't shop downtown, and to understand for a community our size, for the small local population that we have a plethora of products that are available. However, price and selection often came up. People like the look of downtown and they feel safe in our community. I was very surprised that as many people drive downtown that are locals as do bike and walk. And when we ask people why it is that they go downtown driving, it came down to, there was people that said, you know, I take my mom out from the seniors home once a week and it's an outing and I need to use the car. Or because of COVID, I could only buy my groceries once a week or once every second week. And so I need my car to get those big purchases home. And so people are still using their car quite a bit to go downtown, but just as many people are biking and walking and using, I heard about from the skateboarders as well. People skateboard downtown as well. So residents use downtown more for the events that we have. And of course, under COVID, we haven't been able to have them, but events and community are really a great reason to head downtown. And people that live in Jasper also use the patios last summer, but there was a little bit of hesitation about using them again this summer. And one of the things that did come up was the design made people uncomfortable. One with the congestion of the downtown core, but also to the design. And so when we asked people about street closures, which is it's always been a big issue in Jasper, people said yes, they would do street closures, but they still wanted to be able to get their cars downtown for those special occasions or those things that they needed. So it's kind of really hard to say at this point what people really want. When we looked at what we could recommend over what we found, we did make a number of recommendations in our report. The first being community events and festivals. It's working, it goes well. People love going downtown for events and for festivals. And even when the festivals are held in Centennial Park, people come downtown to get a snack or just get the feel of downtown. So community events and festivals are really supported and they should continue to be supported. It's a great way to showcase our community and to celebrate what we have. Sidewalk patios were quite a bit of conversation, and I think it comes down to the communication. And even in our survey, we said sidewalk patios when the intention with the municipality was for every business to take advantage of the sidewalk under the COVID restrictions. But I think in terms of what happened locally was that people assumed that sidewalk patios meant food and beverage. And so there needs to be a little bit of a communication piece there on that. There are creative ways for businesses that don't serve food and alcohol that can use the sidewalk, and they're just as welcome to use the sidewalk and the parking stalls as other businesses, but there needs to be a little bit more communication on how that can be done, and maybe find a leader in the business community to be a champion to do that is outside the food and beverage sector. Street closures, I would love to say that this is the answer to the question, but I can't. And I think as long as street closures, as long as street closures are not clearly defined on what that means, we need to have a good, serious conversation as a community what that's all about. Business owners were a little bit mixed. There are some businesses that really depend upon having a car parked in front of them. Seniors use the sidewalk, the grocery store and the pharmacy as well. So other non-food businesses to get around, and they need a car to do that. Also, some businesses are not designed for laundry services, for example. The last thing you want is to have your customer trucking their dirty laundry up Patricia Street in a basket. It doesn't work well for what the business has to offer. So we really think that, given that we only had 292 residents complete a survey, we really think there needs to be more of a community conversation about this. We need to hear more voices, and we need to have some kind of mechanism or public consultation in place so that people can have a voice on street closures and what they would like to see. Parking will always be an issue downtown. There were lots of opinions on parking. Unfortunately, our survey was designed and implemented before paid parking came about, or we would have asked a question about paid parking. But I think parking is always going to be an issue, and there's some confusion right now about the lack of space downtown because of parking, because we see now the many number of patios that are taking parking stalls. And so the clarity on what it means to have a vehicle downtown and what it's used for, and paid parking, the paid parking in almost in competition with the sidewalk patios, is an issue that needs to be explored. And finally, beautification. There is such a need for beautification in the downtown, and it's the responsibility of us as community members, it's the responsibility of businesses, it's the responsibility of the local government to have a look at making downtown more walkable, more public art, more bike racks, more artisan and musician sponsored events. And, you know, there's lots of things that, after reading many Parks Canada regulations, there's many ideas that can happen within those regulations for both business exteriors and for building owners to do in terms of beautification, but also for the municipality in terms of many examples that are seen all throughout the province in terms of beautification that can just add a little bit of extra. So, and we've seen with the popularity of the mural that was painted downtown, just on the Robinson's building there, that there is the potential for it to grow in terms of public art. That's all I have for my presentation. I'm not sure, Your Worship, if there are questions this morning.
I'm not sure either, but I will put that to council momentarily. But thank you very much, Nancy, for that really thorough report. Quite timely as well, much appreciated. And I will say that as I read through it, I did consider that this should in fact be a must read for anyone who is thinking about running for council or for the mayor's position this fall. This does a really good job of encapsulating the difficulties of trying to govern any community. There are a range of views on every item, and you've done a great job pointing that out. So thank you for that. And I will turn it to councillors. Are there questions of councillors for Ms. Robbins? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you for that, Nancy. That was great. My question is, has this study influenced what the municipality is currently doing at the downtown core, or have we preemptively jumped on, replacing trees and getting planters going and that type of thing, or has it been kind of a collaboration with Community Futures?
Your Worship, maybe if I can address Councillor Wilson's question. administration did have a preview of this, and at the same time, John, Mr. Greathead, and the operations team were well aware that there need to be improvements. Council remember that at a budget discussion, there was amount, I think that was reflected in the budget as a general amount for infrastructure improvements, I believe of about $200,000. At budget time, we discussed how that would be used across the downtown core. And so the improvements that you're seeing this spring are directly related to that budget approval that council gave for that $200,000. The replacement of tree grates, installation of trees where there were none, that's all led by Mr. Greathead and his team. But absolutely, administration was aware of the contents of this report and the overall sort of community sentiment that there needed to be some focus on the downtown core.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Robbins. I have to say I'm really impressed by the thoroughness of the report and what I take to be an outcome from a really professional approach. I just have a couple of questions to that topic around methodology. First of all, did you hire consultants or professionals in doing surveys to produce this? Did you and your staff do it yourselves? I'm just wondering about that. And then the second question as to methodology is you have gone to the trouble, and which I appreciate, of pointing out throughout the number of respondents, and that's really helpful. And that you provided some details as to numbers of respondents that indicated certain, categories of thinking on various things. So I'm just interested in how you recruited respondents, how you went about, I guess, enticing people to participate. So those are my two questions. And again, thank you for that valuable work. I think it is really helpful to the community.
Through His Worship to Councillor Butler, to answer those two questions, we have a consultant that we have on staff, a contractor that does our economic development projects. So we worked with her to do this project. However, also as well, it was the efforts of myself and my Edson business liaison that finished the final product. I acknowledge that my Edson counterpart that works for me is a much better proofreader than I am. So we involved her in the process as well. And secondly, to your question, how we recruited respondents, we did do it on Facebook, and also for the businesses, we individually contacted each business. In the downtown core, we compiled a list of businesses that were available downtown. I believe the number is 117 somewhere that are located exactly in the downtown core. And we personally invited them to either complete the survey online or do it with us on the telephone, because we wanted to make sure we got as many voices downtown that we could possibly get from the business community. In terms of residents, we did a Facebook and Instagram campaign, marketing campaign, and we had a prize for a $50 gift certificate at a local business. Debbie Dirksen won it, and I owe her a gift certificate, but that's how we got the residents to complete it. And I pleaded and begged with everyone, almost everybody that I know, to complete the survey. So I guess in methodological terms, you would call it the snowball technique, where one person tells another person and tells another person. If times were different, the numbers would have been much higher. Our initial plan was to do community group meetings and also do focus groups, and have our initial plan was to have a map of downtown and have people write on it, very similar to the transportation work that was done, I think, about 2 years ago. So that was our initial plan. It didn't work out that way, just with restrictions. I had a bigger dream than what it turned out to be, but I'm very happy with the end result. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. And great work. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I see a question from Councillor McGrath and then Councillor Journeau.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you very much, Mrs. Robbins, for your presentation and for going through all of this work to bring us this really concrete detail from the residents and the businesses of Jasper. It's certainly so appreciated. It ties in super well with agenda item number 4.4 that you're also super well aware of, and the timing couldn't be better. So thank you very much. I know specifically one of the mentions was on a special conversation on street closures possibly being targeted, and maybe even we can spend some time closing the loop and drawing things together. Community development does have some funding with the municipality of Jasper right now to do some targeted community conversations, and perhaps that's an idea to bring forward. So thank you very much, and really, really excellent job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Journeau.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Ireland, and congratulations, Ms. Robbins, for your report and fine details and presentation. My question is on item 8.5, when you talk about beautification, and you suggest that making downtown more walkable. Is there anything outside of closing Patricia Street that you would be recommending here? And I have a second question.
To Councillor Journeau through the chair, I think people have to have a reason to walk downtown, especially if you're a resident and it's just you. People are very purposeful in how they use downtown, especially in the summertime, because as a resident, you're very aware of what the constraints are with space. Making a community more walkable means that you make it accessible for people to feel comfortable. And what we heard a lot was about the use of the sidewalk and the use of the street for patios made people feel a little congested, made people feel a little bit uncomfortable. And when we're living in the climate now that we're living in, when people are very aware of wearing a mask and being aware of socially distancing, people are going to pull away from walking downtown because they're not comfortable with how the sidewalks and the patios are being used. So it all has to work together in that having accessible bike racks that are easy to use, making that sure that people have the space, especially if they have mobility issues or if they're very aware of COVID, to have the comfort level to go to the businesses that they want, but also to something new to draw people downtown, whether that be public art, book walks, reasons to engage the people that can go downtown and have a purposeful meaning to go there without having to spend money is also a really big factor. So by setting all those things up and putting them in place, we are by default making it more walkable because people will feel a need to go there. And that doesn't necessarily mean a street closure. That just means making people more comfortable and more familiar with the space that they're using. The common space, when I came to Jasper, we called it the patch, the space in front of the info center. Is a spot that people mention quite a bit because there is so much open space and you can sit there and you can visit, and there's no reason for you to go there other than to enjoy the environment. And we live in a national park, so people want to enjoy their environment as much as possible. So the more things that we give them to do that do not cost money, that will by default make it more walkable. And having a strategy about downtown needs to, I think, is one of the most important things that needs to happen in the next year and a half. We keep seeing the downtown core as a way for us to get out of an economic recession, yet we don't have a long-term strategy of what our downtown means to us. So if we have a conversation about bringing all those pieces together, right now they're just pieces everywhere. There's paid parking, there's street closures discussions, there's patios, but we don't have a strategy on how that all comes together and what our purposeful goal is about downtown. And once we figure out what that goal is, we can work on all those things and it can come together. So the strategy is missing. We've kind of put the cart before the horse a little bit because we're so desperate to get out of this economic and health crisis that we're in. We keep putting the pressure on the downtown businesses, but we need to build a strategy to help them as well to do that. Long answer to your question, Councillor Janot, but
Thank you, Councillor Janot.
Thank you
Yes, go
for
ahead.
that. I suspect the strategy might be a main goal for the next council. So we'll put that forward right now. Secondly, the item was, you did talk a bit about more bike racks. I suspect that these are comments that are made in your general receiving of the comments, but do you have anything to add to that? Because I'm not aware of any shortage of bike racks in our downtown. I know we're not supposed to latch onto the trees, but people do. Is that a problem? Is that a concern for the landscapers, or people who look after the trees, that the bikes are affecting the trees and we need more racks? Can you comment on that, please?
To Councillor Janot through the chair, yes, we need more bike racks. And yes, people are chaining their bikes to the trees they're putting up against walls. I almost got hit last week walking home from the grocery store because someone went the wrong way up the one-way street on a bike. And I, of course, did not look that way. So we need a discussion about what bikes do downtown. The trees have been really hit very hard because people are putting their bikes against the trees. And also too, you can kill two birds with one stone. You can make your bike racks public art. And there's lots of examples in a lot of different downtowns. The best example I've seen is in Hinton at the Duncan Murray Recreation Center, where their bike racks are actually bikes. And they were designed by people with public art in mind. So you could put new bike racks in, you can put them in good locations. If you noticed in front of Earl's, there tends to be a bike rack there. And I don't know if you've ever gone downtown in August to get your groceries. I live on Mayette, so that's where I put my bike. And you usually just gotta throw your bike into the mess and hope to God that you grab the right bike when you, it's kind of like Walt Disney World, that it's a small world. You just throw it in there and hope your bike's there when you get back. If we want people to ride their bikes downtown, let's make public art our bike racks and let's do some fun things that people will take pictures of and put their bikes up against. And let's just remind people that trees are not great places to chain your bikes to. So yes, there is a big concern. Bike racks came up a lot, actually, a lot.
Thank you for that, Councillor Demoda.
Yeah, I have nothing more to add or ask. There's been a lot of information given to us, and I really appreciate the depth and the broad scope of this. And as someone that does like to ride their bike downtown, I think that I think, like you said, Ms. Robbins, appropriate bike racks in appropriate places, I think will help out. I don't know if we need more, but they do need to be distributed a little differently. And I think, an appropriate style for the community would be good. But again, this is great. And I hope that a lot of this information will get used in the future to help us grow, not just downtown, but, as a community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demoda. I see no other hands. I had one question, Ms. Robbins, and I appreciate that this study was conceived pre-COVID and it unfolded during COVID. So I perfectly understand if my question is out of scope and you defer for that reason. But because the study did unfold during a time of COVID, I am really interested in the number of businesses that indicated whether they would remain the same, expand, downsize, or close, and only 2% indicated that they might close. Can you speak to that number in the context of COVID and sort of the lasting harm that we can anticipate for businesses in Jasper based on that? And again, I appreciate that it was not necessarily within scope, but I was both surprised and frankly really relieved to see that 2% number, but I don't know how I can interpret it.
Thank you for that question, Your Worship. When it comes to closures, it's really hard to predict because it's hard to predict what will happen this summer. And I think when we asked the question, timing was everything. And we are in an environment now in our business communities and all our regions and all our region in the West Yellowhead that access to cash is not an issue as much as it will be in the fall. Right now, there's tremendous amount of programming and funding available for through provincial and federal programs for businesses to remain open. And so it's hard to predict what things will look like in the fall. I think the fact that if we look at our business community, those businesses have been here a very long time. And the longer you stay in business, of course, the less likely you are to close. But I think we asked that question at a time when people were really hopeful about the summer and really hopeful about what we were going to be able to provide. Now, understand as well, we asked this question between the second and third wave. I feel, to be honest, if we ask that question now, on a day when we're just reopening our patios that have been closed for almost a month, we would have a different question and a different answer, because I feel if people do not make their anticipated revenue this summer, and we do see those programs that are going to be ending in September, I really fear that we will have a different answer. And I hope that we stay at 2% that of predicted closures. However, we need to see how the summer folds out, and a lot of different things need to happen. We need to not shut down again. We need to not have a 5th wave, 4th wave, 27th wave. We need, if Stampede comes back, that influences Jasper and the rate of people and Stampede and K days. We need to have a whole bunch of things to happen to make sure that that number stays low. I'm hopeful. I feel much more positive today when I woke up and I saw people on patios, and I feel really hopeful for the summer. I didn't feel that way 3 weeks ago. So I'm hopeful the answer stays the same, but we'll see what the summer brings.
As am I. Well, thank you for tackling that question. I appreciate it. All right, again, thank you for that very thorough report. It will feed in well, as Councillor McGrath suggested, with the Economic Recovery Task Force recommendations that we are going to see later. And it fits in as well as foundational information that will be necessary as we move forward with developing a strategy. So on the cart before the horse question, I am comforted that the foundation of any decent strategy is going to be information, and the sidewalk patios and the expansion of commercial use of public space is still a trial or pilot project to date, as is the paid parking. And as you indicated, further consultation with respect to street closures is something that's required. So that information, together with your report and other reports, will allow us to, in fact, build a sound strategy moving forward. So I am comforted to some degree that we are moving in the right direction. And I thank you for your contribution to that.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to agenda item 4.3, presentation from Aquaterra, and I've seen all of the names there, so I welcome Mr. Bend, Mr. Drysdale, and Ms. Watuni Campbell. Each of you are there. I'm not sure who is taking the lead, but welcome to all. I see Ms. Bend on my screen, so I will impose upon you, sir, to take the lead on behalf of the presenters for this matter.
Actually, Wayne Drysdale here. Good morning, Vice President of Business Development at Aquaterra, and thank you, Your Worship, Ireland. Thank you for the opportunity to present to Council today. We at Aquaterra are very excited to be working in partnership with the town of Jasper. John and Vidal have been excellent to work with, and we can tell they're very passionate about Jasper. So I know this will be a great partnership because soon you'll see how passionate our team is about the work we do. With me today is Mara Whitney Campbell, Manager of Business Development, and the one that has done most of the heavy lifting on this agreement so far and is here to answer any of the hard questions today. And the main guy today is Juan Ben, our CEO of Aquaterra. He'll be making our presentation, so take it away, Juan.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Mayor Ireland and Council and members of administration for taking some time to talk with us this morning. Like Wayne says, we're very excited about working with Jasper. We have a short presentation and then really would just like to open it up for questions. Any questions you have, we'll do our best to answer any questions that you may have. But with that, I'll just introduce myself. As Wayne said, I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Aquaterra. I have 30 years in utility industry, and it seems to have gone by in a blink of an eye. And it's been a great career and a great industry for me and my family. I've spent time with TransAlta, with AltaLink, and with NMAX, and I have national and international experience. And I've saved the best for last in Jasper. So it's taken me a long circuitous route to get here, but I'm glad that we've arrived and look forward to working with Jasper. So with that, I'll just take it to our first slide. First slide, perfectly. Who are we? So our vision is with Aquaterra is we're trusted experts delivering ideal solutions and services essential to growing healthy communities, and with a big emphasis on growing healthy communities. That's really what we're focused on doing with our business. We're a leading provider of water and wastewater and solid waste services in the Grand Prairie region, and we were established as an independent company in 2003. We're municipally owned, and we have extensive experience and expertise in both the public, private, and industrial sectors, and we serve currently over 80,000 customers, and we're growing. We have an independent board of directors, a 9-member board that are drawn from all areas of industry and have tremendous expertise, and they guide our company and our strategy. We're owned currently by the City of Grand Prairie, the County of Grand Prairie, and the towns of Sexsmith and Wembley. We have a highly skilled and dedicated staff, and we have disciplined processes, and we have strived to end up with an innovative culture to deliver some real meaningful value to our customers. Next slide, please. So why do we think this is a great partnership, and why are we so excited? So we really focus on partnerships. That's what we're in. We're in a long cycle business, 30, 50, 100 years. Is kind of the length of our assets, and that's the length of our vision and our focus. So that's why we focus on partnerships. So we think that it's a great idea that we get together because we're confident our collaborative approach is going to be an excellent fit for the municipality of Jasper. We really try to focus on partnerships and open book policies. We take pride in what we do, and we've built strong relationships so far with the municipalities and the communities we serve. So that's why one of the reasons we think this is going to work great. We have high standards. We have high safety and environmental performance, and it will meet Jasper's expectations and requirements befitting of a national park. We have strong existing relations with our regulatory agencies and partners. So we work well with all the regulators, and we have strong industry relations and partnerships as well that we think we can bring to bear and help with some of the challenges Jasper is going to be facing. And operational excellence is a key component of our business. So we have highly trained staff with technical expertise, and we're committed to a transparent operating culture with the municipality. Again, open book, focusing on partnerships. We want to work with the municipality to develop and optimize a solid plan with options that delivers sustainable operations and for the municipality of Jasper. Just heard some of the challenges recently this morning that you're dealing with. And as an operator ourselves, we realize you don't always have the resources that you would like. So we want to bring to you solutions. We want to optimize what you have. We want to bring our expertise to bear and give you options on how to go forward and how to operate your facility and how to make sure that we add value to the community. A lot of information on this slide, but really just want to focus on three main topics. On the safety side, we consistently outperform our peers. So we're going to make sure we keep our staff safe. We're going to make sure we keep the public safe. It's a top priority for us. We have aggressive reduction targets around incidents, and it is a top focus for our board of directors. So I know I speak to them at least quarterly on how we're doing and progressing to end up with 0 incidents for staff. We're really focused on environmental performance. We have a strong performance to date in there. We have transparent operations. We have key experts on board that we can put to bear on any problem or any solution or any challenge that comes to in front of both Jasper and the rest of our operation. And like I said before, we have key relationships with the regulatory agencies. And then again, one of the key things that we do, we're obviously focused on quality. We have high standards. We have highly qualified staff. We have a long service staff. We have disciplined process, and we really focus on continuous improvement. That's how we make sure that we can deliver on all of these aspects. And I'm really just gonna end and open up for questions on this last quote from one of our partners just down the road from you. Really what our partner is saying is Aquaterra has consistently demonstrated a high commitment to safety, quality, and environmental stewardship. So we work with Hinton for a number of years now and hope to work with them for a number more. And it's focused on making sure we're meeting their needs. And with that, I didn't have a long presentation. I thought I would open up and save some time for questions. So I would entertain any questions you may have about Aquaterra.
Thank you, Mr. Bend. I will have to ask either that whoever is sharing the screen convert, or if councillors have questions, you can just orally announce yourself and I will recognize you that way. There we go. Now I can see councillors. Mr. Given.
Your worship, just before council gets to any questions for the Aquaterra team, I just thought I'd provide a little bit of additional context. Of course, Aquaterra is here, recognizing that we have a recommendation from administration to enter into the wastewater treatment plant agreement for operation of the plant with Aquaterra. So now would be the time for council members to get themselves acquainted with the company and to ask any questions that they might wish to. Obviously, we won't have that opportunity for Aquaterra to be at the table, so to speak, later on when we're discussing the recommendation. Certainly, as Mr. Bend invited, now's the time for any questions that you might have of the utility or about how they operate.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Questions from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bent, and thank you to all of you for joining today. I have probably just one question. You mentioned that you're owned by the city of Grand Prairie County, Grand Prairie, town of Sexsmith, town of Wembley. Could you run through for us the communities for which you provide services other than those communities? You mentioned Hinton. What other communities are you working in right now where you are a contracted service provider rather than working for a shareholder?
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor. That's a good question. We have worked with and currently working with Manning as well as Hinton. And we have in the past worked for Rycroft. And we do provide services and have provided services for a number of the smaller communities around, more on a project basis. So those are the main ones that we've worked on and are working with on a contract service basis at this point.
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much for that. So I guess I will just ask you for your comment in view. I didn't realize, I should have, but I didn't realize until today that this is actually a municipally owned company. So the benefit to those communities is clear. They all need the services provided. And I assume they've decided that ownership is a benefit. Has the company considered in picking up additional contracts like Hinton, Mannings, and Jasper, considered the model of inviting those communities to join them as shareholders versus providing a contract-based service package? Is that a conversation that has been held or not? I guess is my question. Thank you.
That's an excellent question, and it sounds like you've been reading our long-term strategy, Councillor. So we actually are using operating contracts to get known in the different communities and various municipalities. Our long-term strategy is twofold: is to focus on operational excellence. Obviously, we need to deliver services, and yet the second piece is to grow with partnerships with municipalities, particularly. And so, like I said, we're using the operating contracts to be known outside of our region. Ultimately, we want to offer a share ownership type of option for municipalities if they have an interest. Now, that's in the early stages, sir. And we are still in discussions with, obviously, our board of directors to flesh out how that exactly would look. But that is the long-term intention of Aquaterra.
Thank you very much for those answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler and Mr. Bend. Other questions from councillors? I have one then for you, Mr. Bend. I appreciate that you do this in a few other jurisdictions, none of which appear to be within a national park. So I wonder, specific to the operation of the wastewater treatment plant for Jasper, are you going to be required to meet any higher standard here than you would elsewhere? And if so, is there a cost that can be defined and associated with that higher standard?
That's a really good question. What I would say is, as a base response, is that we, as an organization, meet or beat all regulatory requirements. We really are focused on, obviously, number one is meeting requirements. What we found is that we actually use best practice to exceed requirements. We don't see an additional cost of operating in a national park at this point. We already work with both provincial and federal regulators in our other jurisdictions. So we're not anticipating significantly onerous or actually any additional costs for operating in a national park. Now, Aquaterra doesn't have experience working in a national park, but I do. I worked for TransAlta, and I worked and managed the hydro assets, which has a number of facilities in and around Banff. So I am myself personally fairly familiar with some of the regulations and I would say additional commitments to operate in a national park. And when we've looked at those, we don't foresee anything onerous from our perspective. Obviously, we will meet and exceed and adjust as any types of new commitments or regulations come into play. But at this point, no, sir, we don't see anything onerous.
I do appreciate that. And I would take it then that ultimately the effluent here is discharged into the Athabasca River, which is a Canadian heritage river. And again, you don't see any increase in standards that must be met because of that circumstance, or any particular increased cost because of that.
No, sir. At this point, we're not seeing any additional increases in cost due to the fact that it's in a national park or that it is discharging into the Athabasca River. We do operate under the Canadian drinking water standards. We have worked with extensively DFO as well, Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Obviously, we work extensively with the provincial regulators. Don't see anything at this point that would cause us any additional costs. That being said, regulators do change as we go forward. But what we think is we'll bring our experts to bear. We are interacting with the government agencies on a regular basis anyways. So hopefully if they are making changes, they will be sustainable changes, and we should be able to meet those as we go into the future.
Thank you very much for that. And I had one further question, and I will impose myself. I don't see other hands up in any event at this time. You indicated in your presentation that in addition to wastewater, you also, Aquaterra also deals in solid waste. And do you serve the same communities outside of the ownership group in terms of providing solid waste services?
Currently, our solid waste services are within our existing service area. We have had interest expressed from Hinton, as you know, interested in potentially taking us on solid waste services side. But at this point, we are interested in it. But we initially are focusing on water and wastewater as a kind of our core offering. But we will obviously entertain if other municipalities are interested. We do have here a bioreactor landfill, which actually is essentially ends up generating a lot of green credits because we do collect methane gas off of our landfill and route that to generate power and heat both our water and wastewater plants. So we do have that technology. We are familiar with that technology. Obviously, we are extensively involved in recycling, which I'm sure you all know is challenged globally right now. We are working with the province on the recycling side. And so solid waste services is a core, what we consider a core utility. Very interested in offering that service to other municipalities as well. We do have expertise to offer the market.
All right, well, thank you for that. A tangential issue on perhaps a discussion for another day, but thank you for that information. Councillors, are there other questions? Councillor Butler.
Thanks, and forgive me, and thank you for the opportunity to ask one more question. I want to follow up and just drill down one level deeper on the question that Mayor Ireland was asking about challenges in the national parks. So if I think I'm correct in saying that our plant is required to operate as a level 4 wastewater treatment plant. I see you nodding, so I think I'm correct in that. So in the other communities that you serve with wastewater, are those facilities operating at a level 4 as well, or are they at say a level 3?
Yeah, I think, so what I would say is that we have extremely highly qualified operators. And that's where we see there is a benefit in our strategy of our offering to a larger customer base, because what it does is actually helps us grow our staff. And we're really focused on developing our staff. But we have level 4 operators, both in water, wastewater, distribution, and collection. So we can handle, you know, the whole value stream across the board. And some are, you know, some are level 3, some are level 4, but we have the capability of ramping up or ramping down depending on the situation in the municipality. We're planning to offer services to there. So, and we are very focused on, and I think that's where we see benefits of, you know, just a quick aside, I grew up in a small community on a farm in Manitoba, and I watched the community disappear, right? First the railroad stopped, and then the highway moved. I'm seeing smaller communities challenged. We see a niche in offering services to these smaller communities, but trying to get economies of scale by offering it to more smaller communities using a hub and spoke model. And so that goes for the services, that's go for the professionals, and obviously for the operators as well. So we have the capability of offering services across the spectrum.
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that you deftly avoided needing to correct me, because I think what you're implying, what I think actually is the case, isn't really the plant that operates at level 4, but the requirement level 4 operators on site. And what you're telling me is that in your company, you have level 4 operators already, so well within your scope and purview of expertise. And that's what I was trying to get at. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. We have the capability to deliver on all your needs.
All right, thank you for that. In the absence of further questions, and I see no hands, I again thank you, Mr. Bend, Mr. Drysdale, and Ms. Latuni Campbell, who we didn't get to see but shared her screen for us. So thank you all very much. And we will continue with our discussions later with respect to, I think it is agenda item 9.1, but thank you for the information you've been able to provide to us at this time.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you, Council. We can move to agenda item 4.4, the final of our 4 presentations, and Mr. Jackson from Tourism Jasper is up, and thank you for your patience, sir, in waiting for us to get through those previous 3 presentations, all of which I'm sure you found most interesting, as did we. So we are now at the Economic Recovery Task Force recommendations presented by you. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen if that's all right. And just a little head nod if everybody can see that. Perfect. 1 second. All right, here we go. Well, thank you, Your Worship and Council, for having me today. I'll try to keep this brief. I know it's a full agenda. So today I'm speaking on behalf of the task force's past chair of the committee, and not necessarily in my role with Tourism Jasper. On that note, a quick disclaimer, Tourism Jasper as an organization itself is not advocating specifically for any given recommendation unless I sort of state otherwise. But as a member at large of the task force, we're not an advocacy organization, although we do dip our toe from time to time into that type of dialogue. But I just want to make that clear that right now, today, I'm representing the committee at large. Special thanks before we get started to Kayla Byrne and Christine Adone for managing the committee's actual work. I feel at times that might have been rather challenging, a bit of herding cats, but I really just want to convey our support and appreciation for that, for their work. Just as a quick reminder for everybody on the call today, on April 21st in 2020, Council voted to establish the Economic Recovery Task Force. Many of the recommendations that I'll present today have already been undertaken, and some of which have already been completed. But as COVID lingered, the task force attempted to sort of rebalance the day-to-day and urgent recommendations, most of which made their way to council in some fashion, with the longer-term sustainable recovery of our destination's economy. The task force undertook a multi-party visioning exercise to establish what a positive future state might look like for the community at 3 different time horizons. Those were the near term, which would end in the fall of 2021, the midterm, which would realize itself in the spring of 2022, and the long term, which would realize itself in 2025. I really want to sort of commend the committee at large. It was a very consultative, collaborative, and very thorough process. So admittedly, at first I thought we would quickly make a series of sort of tactical recommendations. However, as COVID evolved last year, I think we all realized that this was not going to be the 6-week sort of quick quarantine in and out that we at the time thought it might be. We realized that there was going to be a longer time horizon required. And so as such, I just want to highlight again that a lot of these recommendations might be at a higher level and longer term. And unfortunately today, just given the time constraints and the pervasiveness of a lot of these recommendations, I'm not going to be able to go into a lot of detail at all. In fact, I'll breeze over everything pretty quickly, but I think this is a great first step and a great sort of end to the presentations that we've seen today. It really complements everything that you've been discussing all morning. The recommendations have been broken down into 6 key themes, and those are operational, fiscal, infrastructure and transportation, social, promotional and advocacy, and economic growth. I will note that there is no order of importance, but I will underscore that progress is required sort of on all fronts to see ourselves to full recovery. And so we really need to step back and see the entirety of the series of recommendations and try not to get bogged down in any specific one. Lastly, I've taken the liberty of shortening a lot of the recommendations for the purposes of this presentation. So if you see clarity, please utilize the attached document in the agenda. I just basically kept it simple for the purposes of this presentation, but we want to make sure that you get the verbiage right. Utilize that attachment. So with that, I will dive right in. The first theme was operational. And so there were 4 key recommendations within that category. The approval of a permanent patio program. We're well on our way. I know this council has discussed this recommendation many times, but I think the key component here is permanency. For businesses to realize their investment for patios and for them to align with a lot of the things Nancy was talking about around vibrancy and pageantry downtown, it has to be permanent for them to realize those investments. I think everybody understands that. The implementation of paid parking, that is obviously a very complex recommendation. The idea there is that it creates revenue for the municipality that it can then put against other initiatives. That's why the committee was supportive of it. Consider the closing of Patricia Street. As Nancy was discussing earlier, that's a big topic, and I think a lot of discussion needs to happen there. Again, we're not suggesting that it be closed permanently. We're not suggesting anything, but I think a deep dive is required, and that's really what we're recommending. And finally, the development of a destination development plan. Personally, my committee colleagues will know that this is sort of my baby on the list, but I think this is sort of the most important next step for what council might want to pursue. And so for council's reference, a destination development plan is sort of a strategic document that will act as a follow-up to a lot of the recommendations in this report. It's a piece that brings it all together through a third party. It's the document that does a lot of the due diligence, the groundwork required for implementation of a lot of these recommendations. And this will be the one recommendation that I will say Tourism Jasper is extremely supportive of. In fact, so supportive, we would love to be a financial partner involved in it. Just because it is that cohesive look. And I think it's really important that we bring a third external party in to help facilitate that conversation, to bring back best practices from around the world. So moving on to financials, the establishment of a COVID-19 relief fund, I know this council is well aware of that. You know, there's been lots of discussions about how to utilize the most funding. I know one of the other takeaways for administration will be to create a plan as to how those dollars are utilized. I think the undertone of this recommendation is really around exploring how to utilize the fund that stimulates services, businesses, or initiatives that drive incremental revenues. So an example could be transportation. That's something I'll sort of drip in throughout the discussion today. It would be fantastic if we can find the most effective way to find a return on the investment of those dollars is really what that comes down to. Second is freezing tax increases. It's pretty self-explanatory. Developing a predictive task forecast. I know a lot of businesses, mine, Tourism Jaspers included, does not operate on an annual sort of, although we do operate on an annual fiscal cycle, we're planning into the future, and private businesses do that as well. They're trying to realize capital investments decades into the future. And if we can have a predictive way to forecast taxes, I think that would help the private sector a whole lot. Oh, sorry. And then finally, pursue the elimination of land rent. This, again, was a recommendation based on the cost to the municipality itself. And so happy to see that included. Moving on to infrastructure and transportation. Invest in beautification of the downtown, as Nancy discussed. That's a part of a larger revitalization discussion that started today, and we're thankful for that. As well, we want to recommend the development of a municipal infrastructure plan. Again, long-term predictable behavior is good for business. They can build their models around it, and it helps with their pro formas and accounting every year. So really predictiveness is the key there. And then finally, the development of a transportation plan. This, I think, is a really key component of what the future of our destination is going to look like over the next few years. I think if any of our viewers have taken a look at the Parks Management Plan, Alignment with transportation is key. Active transportation is a big theme in that plan. And I think there's already a really strong desire from the private sector for the municipality to support transportation services of some kind. So building on Nancy's earlier point, you've probably noticed that there's a sort of recurring theme around creating a vibrant atmosphere in the downtown district throughout this series of recommendations. And so I would really encourage council to think about this holistically. To her point about the cart before the horse, I really think that economic vibrancy could be that objective that she was talking about, and not in terms of any single recommendation. So not in terms of a street closure or a paid parking or a beautification, but it's around economic vibrancy. And so the question that I sort of use to coach myself with this concept is really a simple question. And it's about how can we facilitate more wallets and encourage them to linger in as close proximity to cash registers as possible. And so there's components of beautification in there, seating, transportation, parking, it's all part of one plan. And I think that's what Nancy was talking about around how we need to really think about that cohesively. And that could potentially, depending on the scope, be done through a destination development plan. On to social. A lot of the recommendations here on the 8 you'll see on the screen were came later. And as the discussion deepened, we really started to realize that Jasper's visitor economy is really an ecosystem. And there are a lot of contributing factors. And one of the biggest ones that you'll notice is housing. And so there are a few of these that might be perceived as redundant, but I think it's important to remember that there's a reason why they're on here, and it's because it's very important. And so at the top of the list, you'll see we want to prioritize housing as a key pillar of economic development. That recognition, I think, is an important first step. And then building on that, the development of affordable housing, not just housing. And then we want to make sure that where possible, we expedite the development of the remaining sites downtown. We want to work with businesses to create employee housing. I think that's an important distinction too, because if we're talking about economic development and recovery, as you know, there are upwards of 600 vacancies for labor on any given year in Jasper. And so employee housing is a key pillar. Also, we want to recommend that council explore the impact of private home accommodations. That is a loaded discussion. We recognize that. But again, deep dive is required if we're talking about sustainable long-term economic recovery. Then we want to support, recommend supporting cooperatively owned housing developments. Jasper's familiar with those. And then the last two are a little bit different. And those are around conducting a labor market analysis and potentially a corresponding talent attraction campaign. Jeanette's team at the Employment and Education Center do a lot of great work on this front. And I think if the destination starts, if we think ahead, we're going to run into some labor issues, worse than we've experienced in the past, for a variety of reasons we don't need to get into today. But I think we need to sort of get ahead of that issue as an entire community. And the municipal council can be a great catalyst for that discussion, I think. And then finally, the development of social infrastructure. And the key takeaway with sort of that component and all of the 8 is, I believe, really around adopting a placemaking approach to economic recovery. People want to invest where they want to live, but before they decide where they want to live, they visit. And before they visit, they're going to evaluate the place if it's suitable for their family's lifestyle. And so that entire, again, ecosystem is really important. So it's a bit nebulous as a concept, but I think it's recognizing that the social services that the municipality of Jasper offer have an impact to the economy in town. On the promotion and advocacy front, we are recommending that the municipal council publicly support the visitor economy. And so this really just means reminding everyone, and that includes visitors, residents, and businesses, as well as other orders of government, that tourism matters, that the visitor economy in Jasper is a serious component of this community. I think historically, there might have been a bit more deliberation on that front. I think after the last 15 months, we can all agree that we've missed those visitors' dollars. So publicly acknowledging that, I think, is an important component. The development of a shop local strategy, building on Nancy's points earlier, the investment in cultural opportunities. So not necessarily social infrastructure, but it's the intangible parts of a community that really sometimes make you want to come back and spend more. A big part was also support the stewardship within the park. The reason why I think a lot of people come to Jasper is because we are situated in a national park and we need to be good stewards within the park. And then a big one here, pursue the transfer of land use and planning as a discussion with Parks Canada. So that's obviously a big discussion as well. But I think if the municipality were to realize its full potential for economic recovery, having authority over those land use and planning policies would be important. But we realize that's a very, very big and long-term recommendation. And then finally, unifying advocacy across the Rockies. There are a lot of issues, labor being one example, housing being one, that stretch across the Rockies. And so I think a unified voice as the Canadian Rockies would help significantly on that front. Finally, economic growth. I think that the entire exercise of the municipality asking for the incorporation of an economic recovery task force was a great first step. But I think being involved on day-to-day and having a day-to-day perspective around economic development is important. What that means has yet to be determined, but the municipality taking at least or acknowledging that would be a great first step. Producing a visitor-friendly business guide. I know there's been some, this is a bit more specific. There's been some discussion around this, especially since COVID, with the complexity of regulations, changes in language used, both in terms of copywriting, but also the actual language the document is written in, but just making the bureaucratic process of business licensing and other processes more streamlined, I think would help. We all know that business owners and management have a lot on their plate these days, and navigating complex permitting is just another challenge on a long list of to-dos. So that's, I think, an easy win. Encouragement of private day homes, and finally supporting of affordable childcare. There was a lot of discussion maybe this time last year around childcare as it pertains to economic development. Our committee talked about it a lot. I know firsthand some of our staff here at Tourism Jasper have definitely struggled with sort of the family and work balance around childcare. And I think we've seen that if we can empower families to get back to work, being supported through childcare, that's a good thing, especially given the labor issues in town. So I want to thank all of our committee members for their contributions and commitment over the last year and a half. Sometimes some meetings were better than others, admittedly, but everyone was really professional, committed to the quality of work for the entire community. I think everyone had the Jasper's best interest first and foremost, which was fantastic. I won't go through everybody, but participating organizations were the Municipality of Jasper, Parks Canada, the Jasper Hotel Association, Community Futures, West Yellowhead, the Attraction Sector, Jasper Employment Education Center, Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Jasper. So in closing, I think this last year has taught us all many, many lessons, but I would like to encourage council to remember that this community's business leaders are prepared to do the heavy lifting. They just need a friendly nudge to get them there. And so by focusing on what we can control in terms of reducing hindrances to progress, prioritizing, finding solutions to the most important barriers, and finally having the conviction to sort of proceed in the face of significant challenge, something we've all done for the last 15 months, I think we will be in a very good place. So if we can just focus on what is within our collective control, I think we'll recover, surpass our past successes as a destination in a very sustainable and economically viable manner. So with that, I will take any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, Mr. Jackson, and through you, my thanks to all the members of the task force for a year's worth of work, approximately, and a very thorough and comprehensive report provided to council today. And I do want to share specific thanks to Mr. Jackson, who who did chair a number of those meetings very effectively. He gave credit later on to others, but he was instrumental, and I thank him for that. And it's worth noting as well that Mr. Given, although he entered the process very late, did a really admirable job of helping us wind this up and get this report to council. So again, thanks to Mr. Given for that. Thanks to all members of the task force. And I am so happy to see that you were not afraid, the task force was not afraid to tackle some really large issues, including governance issues. So land use planning and development, our association with our neighbors, particularly in Banff and Canmore, to pursue advocacy at that level, and the elimination of land rent. Those are major issues with which council is engaged, but it is so rewarding to see support from the task force for our efforts in that regard. So thank you for that, and for all of the other individual recommendations that have come forward. With that, I will turn it to councillors for any questions they may have of Mr. Jackson. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. Mr. Jackson, thanks for the presentation. Thanks for presenting this on behalf of the task force. I think I could listen to you speak about community all day, and I hope to one day get to serve on a task force with you and idea share with you. Thank you very much. I don't have any questions, just huge accolades. This is really important information, and I can't wait to dive deeper into it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McGrath. Other questions from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Jackson, much appreciated. I have to say, I find myself in alignment with a great many of the recommendations made. I appreciate all the work that is done, all the time, effort, and consideration that went into that fairly long list of recommendations. However, I have one question, and believe me, I do understand that you are here as a spokesperson for the committee. Where I have trouble is squaring one recommendation against, frankly, almost all of the others. Some of the recommendations made will come at no cost. We can lobby for land rent reductions, for example, without spending more money, but many of the recommendations will come at considerable cost to the community. Yet the committee has recommended a tax freeze, and we can't do all of those things and freeze taxes. I just don't think it can happen. And I guess my question is, how did the committee square that recommendation against all the others? Because it is quite clearly stated as freeze taxes and not, do your best to keep taxes down. So could you comment on that? Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'll back up a little and say one of the reasons why the committee was sort of constructed the way it was because a lot of the organizations involved have a lot of constituent members that they were representing. And so the idea was that we could represent as many businesses and organizations and perspectives as possible. And obviously the business community was a very large component of that input. And frankly, this time last year, as you're well aware, no one knew what was going to happen. And I think, admittedly, I even thought that the impact of Jasper was going to be much worse and much more acute. And that was one of the, I think, first recommendations that we came up with, although we did come back to it many times. I'm not sure if the committee reconciled the potential of every single one of these recommendations happening. So we said that what would be great for economic recovery, and then we created a long and comprehensive list, not necessarily expecting every single one to come to fruition. And we realized that the nature of the committee itself is challenging in that we're reporting back to council. And so some recommendations might not eventually live with council, but some definitely will, and the municipality. And so I think the report is an acknowledgement of some of the opinions out there. But I think, at least speaking for myself, we would be naive to expect council to absolutely deliver on every single one of these long-term, given the constraints that we're all in under COVID. I'm not entirely sure that answers your question, but I would be glad to elaborate more.
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, and it answers it well enough. It was a challenging question. I appreciate it. Also, it puts you personally on the spot, and you are, as you pointed out here, only as a spokesperson. So I appreciate the comments. It does provide some context. And again, I want to extend thanks to all of the members of the committee for what I know was a lot of difficult work. Thank you. And thanks for the answer to the question.
And if I could, I see you, Councillor Demoto, I'll breathe there. And if I could just comment on that, not that Mr. Jackson would ever need a lifeline from me, but as he did indicate early on, he used some shorthand in the slide deck that he went through. But if you turn to the appendix, which is the more fulsome recommendation, the wording is slightly more qualified with respect to a tax freeze and suggests, in fact, a freeze as businesses stabilize or get back on their feet. And so they might be back on their feet much earlier than had initially been predicted. So it is not an unqualified recommendation for tax freezes. And I just throw that out there based primarily on my involvement in the discussion. So I don't know whether that assists at all, Councillor Butler, but it is a bit of a nuance that I think is important to recognize.
It's an important nuance, and I really appreciate that addition. Thank you very much.
Councillor Demoto.
Well, I wanted to say that having the opportunity to fill in for the mayor a few times in being present at the task force meetings, I'm quite impressed, with the recommendations that came out. And I understand that it's very difficult, to get that many leaders in the community together and then come out with a document like this, particularly in the sense that not everybody can advocate or be or can lobby for every item on here, because there would be some conflicts in there. So understanding that, it's impressive the recommendations that came out and what they represent. So I look forward to working with this and future collaboration. So thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, if I may, building on what Councillor Demoto said, I think that might be, I'm contradicting myself, but I think that might be our biggest takeaway here, is that there was an unbelievably good amount of goodwill of all committee members. You'll, reading between the lines, you'll notice who is on the committee and what were some of the recommendations. There was a great understanding of and appreciation of everyone's perspectives. And so moving forward, I think if we can continue that culture of goodwill and really grounding everything in what's best for the destination, what's best for the community at large, I think we're halfway there already. So I appreciate those comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anything else from councillors? If not, thank you, Mr. Jackson, for presenting that report on behalf of the task force. As you indicated, deep dives will be required in a number of subject areas, so we will have to plan the course ahead. I wanted to make specific reference to the recommendation about developing a destination development plan, and thank you for that contribution, a really critical component of all of this. And again, ties into the strategic discussion that we had with Ms. Robbins at an earlier presentation this morning. So thank you for all of that. And on behalf of council, thank you and the task force for this excellent report.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.
All right, council, we have got through the presentations. I would suggest it is now 11:16. We have yet to have a break. I want to break during or between presentations. Now might be an appropriate time, and I would suggest we reconvene at 11:25. So we'll give ourselves 9 minutes for whatever personal business you may need to attend to in a short period of time. So thank you. I'll see you again at 11:25. Welcome back. It is 11:25. Thank you everyone for your punctuality. We will recommence our session at agenda item 5, business arising. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Councillor Demota.
Yeah, I hope I'm not putting anyone on the spot. I just wanted to get a quick update on if anyone knows, maybe through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Given and or Mr. Greathead, if he's available, on where we're at with the speed reduction for Bonhomme. If there are any dates for implementation on the crosswalk and progress on the program.
Mr. Given.
Your worship, Mr. Greathead might have more information about the crosswalk, but I can speak to the speed reduction. The signs have already gone up on Bonhomme. The municipality has already provided some public communication through our social media channels and through the municipal website to inform residents of that. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Greathead for any updates about the crosswalk installation and the hardware associated with that.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Your worship, just to speak to that, we're just waiting delivery on the actual RRFB, the rapidly flashing beacons for the crosswalks. They should be arriving here this week, and we should have them installed and painted by next week. So that's progressing, and good news is price has really dropped since the last time I bought them. Technology always goes down, which is always nice. And there's a significant reduction in the cost once we actually see it delivered and installed.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yes. Thank you both. Any other business arising? If not, then I will turn to, agenda item 6 is department reports. We have nothing scheduled and nothing has arisen, Mr. Given. Thank you. We can dispense with that. Agenda item 7 is information reports, 7.1 taxation rate bylaw 2021 ratio comparisons. There is an attachment. Are there questions with respect to that ratio comparison or the information report generally? And Mr. Given, did you wish to speak to it at all?
Yes, your worship, maybe I could do that just to speak about how this connects with the taxation rates bylaw that's here. So we are recommending that council provide second and third reading to the 2021 taxation rates bylaw. In the information report, you can see administration's recommendation is that council pass the bylaw as it is, but we've included some alternatives for council consideration. And the report details the impact of those different alternatives. The first alternative is council could move forward with second and third reading today as amended with a 5-to-1 tax rate ratio, or council could approve second and third reading as amended with a 4.9-to-1 tax rate ratio. Additionally, council could choose to approve the bylaw as presented with no change to the ratio and further direct administration to present additional discussion on tax rate ratios in the context of the 2022 budget discussion this fall. In the information report, you'll see that we have tried to simplify the discussion around the tax rate ratio change and its implications. You can see that a shift from our current 5.1-to-1 ratio would essentially shift about $29,000 of burden away from non-residential properties onto the residential property classes. Under a 4.9 to 1 ratio, that amount would increase to about $59,000 that would be shifted. I think it's important context for council and the community to know that that burden of either the 29,000 or the 59,000 would be spread across all of the residential taxpayers. And so that's approximately 1,200 residential properties that would share that burden. And Ms. Melnichuk has provided some additional work for those that prefer to think in terms of the per $100,000 of assessment. Under the shift to the 5 to 1 ratio, residential properties would see an increase of about $3.40 in taxation per $100,000 of assessment. Non-residential properties would go down by about $5.80. Under the 4.9 to 1 ratio change, residential properties would go up about $6.90 per $100,000 of assessment. And non-residential properties would go down about $11.70 per $100,000 of assessment. So that was a little bit of a late addition, council, but I know that people process this information differently. It can be helpful to understand first the total amount, like how many dollars are we talking about altogether? That's included in the report, the $29,000 shift away from non-residential properties or $59,000 shift away from non-residential properties. It can also be helpful to say, okay, what does that mean per house? And so really what we're talking about is dividing either of those amounts by the number of residential properties, which is just over 1,200. Or others may prefer to think about it in that, what's this mean per $100,000 of assessment? So I could do the math on what my bill might increase at, and you could do that using those numbers that I just stated. I really appreciate Ms. Melnichuk being able to do the work to provide the financial information to council here in what we hope is a concise format that will allow council to really think about the principles here and to discuss and debate the bylaw with full information in front of you. You should also know that we have worked with Parks. They have provided certification of the bylaw. We have received that already. They recognize that the numbers may change, but that in any case, Parks is ready to certify the bylaw, recognizing that the change in numbers really doesn't have an impact on Parks. And so they've provided that certification ahead of time for us. So administration is recommending that council move forward with second and third readings of the bylaw. We are recommending that you move forward with it under the 5.1 to 1 ratio. But we have in this report provided alternative motions if council wish to do second and third reading as amended under either of those other two scenarios. And so this is provided here for information for council to consider as they move forward with the consideration of second and third reading of the bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota.
Well, I have to thank administration for coming forward with the alternate options. I'm not in favor of the 5.1 to 1 recommendation only because it doesn't provide us with a clean house. And from my experience in working with other levels of government, if we go out down the road in the future and lobby for other tools or whatever it is that we might need, the message of just being 0.1 over looks like, if you're looking at it externally, that we're purposely being non-compliant by 0.1 in the process. And that looks like you're making a statement. And to me, I just think, I wouldn't even mind, discussing the 4.9 today, but as a matter of housekeeping and staying compliant, there's no reason why we should be non-compliant when it comes down to the MGA, regardless if there's no deadline or not. I just think it's best practice to stay in compliance with what the province is requiring us. Thank you.
So thank you, Councillor Demota. I just will remind council that we do have the tax rate bylaw and argument on that as a separate agenda item 8.2. We are on 7.1 now, which is the information report. So if I could just ask councillors to restrict questions to the information report, and we will come to debate soon enough. Deputy Mayor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you to Mr. Given, Ms. Malinchuk, and the team who prepared this really well prepared report. I appreciate the way in which it's laid out and the level of detail that's been provided to us for conversation today. So very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McGrath. If there are not specific questions about the report itself, I will move us on. I see no hands up, so we can move to agenda item 8. 8.1 is simply a bylaw summary for information, so we can go then straight to agenda item 8.2, which is the tax rate bylaw here for second and third reading. As Mr. Given has confirmed, we do have certification, even though we don't have a bylaw. It's just a question of what numbers go in it. So we can deal with both readings today if we so choose. Last occasion, our last regular meeting, the tax rate bylaw 2021 received first reading at 5.1 to 1. And so it is now here for debate and discussion. And I would invite any member of council to make a motion with respect to second reading, so we can proceed with that necessary debate. Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I would make a motion that council read for the second time or have second reading of approving the tax rate split at a 5.1 to 1 ratio for the 2021 year. I'd like to add to that we direct administration to start the conversation of reducing the tax rate to below the 5 to 1 ratio for the 2020 to 2022 tax roll to enable us to have more time to discuss the implications of this move.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Just so I can understand, you had a motion to read bylaw number 236 for the second time at the 5.1 to 1. Did you intend the direction to be a separate standalone item?
Yeah, to keep it easy and straightforward, I would keep the current motion as is, and I could wait, and then later after this vote, I could make a motion to direct administration as discussed.
All right, thank you for that. So I will take it that the motion on the floor then is second reading of bylaw 236 in its current form. I see you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Wilson, it is your motion. You're entitled to open debate if you wish, and then I will turn to Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I'd like to first off say that I kind of like the moniker non-conforming, as we are very different than many other communities in Alberta. We're very similar to Banff, who is also non-conforming. I don't think it's we're not standing outside the boundaries here. This is set in place so communities such as ours may operate outside the conforming ideals, maybe not ideals, but moving on, I think the increase or decrease for any property class when spread out across all rate papers is so minimal as put forward in the last agenda item. So I believe remaining at status quo is the most prudent option for the municipality, giving us some flexibility. There's a lot of talk that next year and years to follow, there's going to be a large tourism boom following the pandemic. And I think we need to be flexible to increase the tax split if needed. Not to say that I support doing so, but I think we need to have the ability to offer our visitors the services they expect. Again, I mentioned that we tend to align ourselves with similar municipalities in Alberta, and there's not many. We have unique challenges. I'd like to point out Banff. The town of Banff is also non-conforming, and I don't think they're making any moves to become conforming. So, we're not outside the boundaries. We're just operating a little bit differently. Once we conform, there's no opportunity to go back. And I believe over the past 2 decades, we've reduced the tax ratio split substantially. I feel that past councils have reduced the rate pretty drastically and intentionally stopped at the 5.1-to-1 ratio. I think they knew that the further reduction would drastically reduce the municipality's flexibility if needed. So we are at 5-to-1. Like, honestly, it's very minimal. It's very minimal change in either way once you spread it out across the tax rate, tax rate payers. But we're just really handcuffing ourselves to a 5-to-1 and no larger. If we make this decision at this point without an extended discussion. I'm into the discussion. I think that could happen in the coming months for 2022. But I think at this point, we need to be flexible. Our municipality needs to be flexible. And I'd like to stay at the 5.1-to-1 ratio. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, Councillor McGrath, and then Councillor Demota.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thanks, Councillor Wilson, for presenting the motion as you did and for your opening as you've stated it. I agree with your motion, and I will support your motion by voting in favor of administration's recommendation of staying at 5.1-to-1 this year. I also recognize the small value of numbers that are presented in this decision in the grand scheme of our municipal taxation.
Councillor McGrath, I think we have all lost the ability to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I am having pretty large difficulties with my sound today. Should I start from the beginning?
If you would, please.
I'd like to thank Councillor Wilson for presenting the motion as he did. And though we are speaking about small, fairly insignificant numbers in the grand scheme of our municipal taxation, it's a principled decision for me. And it's a principled decision for me today that I cannot ask residents to pay more this year, even though it is a small amount. The principle of asking residents, our neighbors, our friends, to pay more while they're unemployed, while they're already struggling, and while they are at risk of leaving our community. I do see the value in the change and in the recommended change of going to a 5.1-to-1 or going to a 4.9-to-1. And I would like to further these discussions and consider it in the future. If there is a shortfall and the commercial industry needs $28,000 to $48,000 in the value of the ratios, I would suggest finding that within the COVID relief and buffering it if the commercial industry in Jasper requires that assistance this year. However, I do align with staying to a 5.1-to-1 for this year, as is.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McGrath. Councillor Demota.
I understand the perspectives presented on remaining status quo. And for a lot of the arguments of the nominal flex that this will cause in the tax rates for everybody, I think that now's the time to do it because we do have a cushion. We've already applied some of the tax relief to the tax bill this year. And I think this will be the year to move it because if you move it down the road, we might not have the cushion. And I don't think for the argument that it's going to make us more inflexible down the road. I think that argument is moot for the same reasons that you might think that they're not. So having said that, I think it's just important to have a clean house in this matter, and to have proper fiscal books. And this, to me, being non-compliant right now doesn't make sense. And I think it was deemed on us to take care of it. We've had 4 years to do it, and I don't believe kicking the can down the road any further makes any sense. So I think we should just clean it up, and I can't vote in favor of 5.1 going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Janot.
I would prefer, thank you, Mr. Mayor, I would prefer that we move to 4.9 to 1 this year. To be compliant. Both Councillor McGrath and Councillor Wilson have indicated they'd be prepared to do it next year. I don't know why we would postpone it 1 year. I would like us to be compliant. After all, we're compliant with the next level of government, the Department of Municipal Affairs. That is the government that gives us a lot of grants, a lot of funding. Always have new programs, and that we like to be considered for. And if we're not compliant, we may not be considered for that. The burden per household is nominal. It's between $20 and $50 from the calculations that I have made. And very simply, it'll put us compliant within the laws of the land. Thank you.
I see you, Mr. Given. I'm going to go to Councillor Butler, but I will get back to you. Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. However, what I was actually trying to do is direct your attention to Councillor Keller-Rempe, who I think is on her phone and doesn't have a great visibility, and perhaps you hadn't noticed that she has had her hand raised. Thank you. I will have something to say. I'll wait.
Thank you for that. Councillor Keller-Rempe, welcome to today's meeting. Sorry, I did not see your hand there. If it was up, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, Council, for allowing me to come in intermittently today. I did enjoy part of the Aquaterra presentation, and I also enjoyed part of Mr. Jackson's presentation. I can't support this motion. Our businesses came to us, our hotel association, our chamber came to us. They came to us last December when we put out the budget and the utility budget, and asked us to go talk to them. We did not do that. I've been on council 8 years, and it always has been, well, our businesses hasn't come to talk to us. Well, our businesses came to talk to us. And I agree with Councillor Demota and Councillor Janot. It's so minimum. I'm prepared to make an amendment, a friendly amendment to your motion, Councillor Wilson. Councillor McGrath indicated that we could give the most money to the businesses, but how about we offset the 4.9 this year with the most money, and then it cushions them to bring them into compliance. You know, as we go forward, our taxes are going to go up and up and up. We have less business. We seem to have more residential all the time. We're building more residential all the time. And I think it's fair that we spread it, because in the end, it's still going to be 4.9 to 1. And as Councillor Janot said, it's $50 difference in a household. That is not a lot of money. We have businesses this year that have been 90% down. We have business in town that never opened, and they own their building. It's not fair. We have to look at everybody. So I'd be happy if Councillor Wilson would accept a friendly amendment to his motion that we extend 4.9, but use the most money to offset it for 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hrampe, I think that as chair of the meeting, I would have to rule and do rule that would not be a friendly amendment.
Okay.
It the nature, but I welcome a motion from you to amend the motion, and that will keep us compliant with the procedural bylaw. If we have a motion to amend for second reading to change the number, and that changes, that's an amendment essentially to the first reading. But I would entertain that as a motion to amend now. So from 5.1 to, or pardon me, 5.1 to 1 to 4.9 to 1. And if that is your motion, then we will debate the motion to amend first and see where we're at.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All right, so we now have a motion to amend as stated. So the debate now is 4.9 to 1 tax rate split. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you everyone for your thoughts. And Councillor Keller-Hrampe for the proposed amendment. I have a few comments. And since I acknowledge that I was the one that raised this issue, it won't surprise anyone that I have to say. I'm going to focus all of my remarks on this amendment. I think there has grown a suggestion that this is a sudden or unexpected discussion, and it's not. This is exactly the time that we need to have this discussion. My concern primarily, as I've stated in the past, has been that that 5.1 ratio has been sitting there for something like 10 years with, as far as I can tell, essentially no consideration from council. We as council make a couple of really important and impactful decisions in the course of our year. One, of course, is the budget, which says what the tax envelope or the tax requisition will be in any given year. And then the next and even more impactful decision that we make every year, but we don't even talk about it, is what will everyone pay relative to one another. And that's where equity really is or is not built into the system. And I have been very uncomfortable that year after year, we pass a bylaw that contains a complex table of mill rates without really a public understanding, or even, I suspect, an understanding among council as to how important those numbers are. So for me, more than anything else, this is a question of open, transparent, and accountable government. We are accountable for the numbers in that table when we pass that motion, yet the suggestion seems to be that really it's not something to be talked about, and I think it is. First, I want to mention the intent of the MGA. I understand the intent of the MGA, that the maximum ratio should be 5 is only the intent, and I'm happy to recognize that it is nothing but a guideline. But what I have not heard is an argument for, if we exceed the guideline, why? Why should we exceed the guideline? I don't see a strong argument, and I'm acknowledge that I'm a little perplexed by the recommendation from administration that we remain at 5.1, because I don't see any reasoning or rationale offered for that by administration. I don't think really administration should care what the ratio is. It is a question for the community. There's an important principle built into the bylaw, but a principle that should be debated. And I feel strongly that that principle should be discussed and debated annually. The letter from the Hotel Association made that point, and I agree with that much more than I agree with whether the ratio should be 5 or 4.9. But it is important right now. It's important right now because we have a commercial sector that is struggling. We have heard it time and time again. And while this would be nothing more, I acknowledge, than a token change, it is an important change. It is an important opportunity to offer a gesture to the business community and our commercial sector that the 5.1, which has become an institutionalized ratio, is not institutionalized. It is not written in stone. It's something that we acknowledge we have control over, and we're willing to have the discussion. There was something mentioned in a previous meeting that, well, such a small shift as we've been discussing is not probably what those who would like the ratio reviewed are looking for. But in fact, the suggestion has been made that why don't we this year to sort of get the ball rolling on this, that we consider a very small move to 4.9. So it is in fact what at least that part of the commercial sector is looking for now, and I'm in agreement with it. The point has been made in the past that this is about equity, and it is, but I've heard no argument that 5.1 represents a more equitable solution than some other ratio. And of course, that's because we don't talk about it. The ratio itself really ought not to be the focus of the conversation. We should really be talking about the relative size of the requisition that the various sectors in the community should shoulder. The residential, the non-resident, the urban, the rural. These are all different assessment classes. And we should really be talking about, well, what's appropriate for those assessment classes to carry? And the ratio should be an outcome of that and not really the focus of the discussion. But we are where we are. And I acknowledge that that conversation would take weeks, if not months. So a small change now, while token, is important. I want to make a point about the assessment. We've had over 150 units of housing added since this ratio was put into place. I think this ratio was put into place in 2011. We've had a considerable, relatively substantial growth in housing. But one of the difficulties we have is that the size of the assessment base in housing has not increased proportionally. That's a problem we have in this town, and it's a problem we need to look at, and there are others. But those are the kind of considerations that should go into a discussion of what the ratio is. Again, we don't raise it, we don't talk about it. But I think that that alone, that growth in the residential sector relative to the commercial sector is something that justifies at least a small move in the ratio at this time. Now is the time to consider this. It's the time to consider it because we promised important community groups in December that we would. The time to consider this is when the tax rate bylaw comes before us. And it's also time because COVID has forced an increased attention and concern with tax rates, as is appropriate. It's also a good time because the most funding has provided the community with a built-in shield against this minor increase. We've already allocated $1 million to the tax requisition for this year. It's a good time to make a shift in the rate because it will be so little felt. I've heard and I've listened to the concerns around paid parking from the community. Members of the business sector have come to me and said, well, you know, I'm worried about that because it seems like it might be a little bit of a blow to the visitor economy. And another reason that it's a good time to think about it is we are budgeting for an input of revenues from paid parking. And I'd like to be able to say that, yeah, we've noticed that this will have an impact on the visitor parking, on the visitor economy, the paid parking, but we're making a little bit of a shift this year to go along with that. So it's appropriate relative to the income that we expect to see from paid parking. And nearly my last point is that over 30% of our annual tax-based budget goes to community services. We have a great standard of living in this community. We were replete with services considering the size of our community. And it costs money. And when council made the adjustment over a year ago by reducing the tax requisition by $1 million, we heard loud and clear from the community that the community is not, residents are not happy to see reductions in services. They want to see their services maintained. And it costs money. And so again, this is an opportunity in a very small token way to point out that these services cost money. And many taxpayers came to us and said, well, you know, I'd rather pay my taxes and keep the services. And what I'm struggling with is that the same voices at our table here who have consistently and on an ongoing basis insisted that we maintain services no matter what through this COVID economic crisis are now saying, oh, well, the business community should shoulder the burden for that. And it's a small burden. It's so few dollars in a way. It's not that significant financially, but it's very significant from a principal point of view. So I am in support of the 4.9 ratio. I think it's little money. It's tens of dollars in anyone's pocket one way or the other. I also want to dispel the notion that this is about flexibility. I don't understand an argument that says stay at 1.1 because we need to be flexible while advocating an inflexibility on changing the rate. We have no more flexibility at 5.1. We can never go up from 5.1. So there's no argument around being nimble or flexible. This is an important symbolic change, if nothing else, to show everyone in the community that this ratio is not something that's written in stone. It's something that councils ought to, should consider every year. There should be requests for consideration coming forward in future years from administration before the tax rate bylaw is passed. And this year, I urge council to support the change to 5.1 to 4.9. It's a relatively minor financial significance, but real significance relative to transparency and openness and accountability. And a small but significant statement in support of the visitor economy. If the amendment to move to 4.9 fails, I will propose an amendment to move to 5 to 1. And if that fails, well, then obviously we will then deal with the main motion, which is for 5.1 to 1. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Other debate? Councillor Demota?
I know I already spoke to the main motion, but now are we able to speak to an amendment if it's on the table? I'm still a little unclear on where we are at the process, because I don't want to drag out the discussion because I have more to say, but if
you
it
may
just
speak,
depends.
it is a fresh motion. You may speak to the motion to amend.
Okay, well, you know, Councillor Butler provided more perspective into the conversation. And although I am not yet ready to move towards 4.9 for the same reasons that, you know, other councillors have mentioned, I think that to go that much further, I think we should spend a little bit more time collectively doing that. And that's something that I regret we didn't do in the last 3 years when we had the opportunity. So I think that although it might be to move to 5 would be appropriate, I think that going further down the road, I'm not prepared to go to 4.9 yet today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. One question that I do have on the topic that is intended for administration and not for debate for council is where Lake Edith stands. So everything that we're mentioning is, so the motion that Councillor Wilson presented, I would assume it stays as is, but this motion that's on the table currently would have an impact or change to the Lake Edith properties. We have heard from the Lake Edith properties in regards to the municipal services that are rendered at those properties. And I would like to offer my words of, I understand and I'm very open on this subject. I agree with Councillor Butler on many of his points that he suggests, that annual consideration is absolutely necessary with these ratios. And I'm just not ready today to move in that direction. I'm comfortable staying as is. The MGA has pointed out that the current ratio is non-conforming, but there is no regulations in place to conform. And therefore I perceive that as in intention that we can stay as is for the moment, but I do wish to proceed down this lane and consider these in the future for next year. But I am empathetic and I understand from all perspectives of the current situation and how the current situation has impacted everyone in our community.
Thank you. Other debate on the motion to amend? Sorry, Mr. Given, not to debate, but to contribute.
I believe I heard Councillor McGrath ask a question at the sort of her last speaking turn, and the question was around how this impacts Lake Edith properties. The recommendation here would be under any of the scenarios, any of the alternatives, to maintain the Lake Edith properties at their 0.58 ratio. So the administration heard the discussion at the last time council saw this, and appreciated that council's intention was really to fix the or address the residential non-residential split without really impacting the Lake Edith properties. As you can see in the report, there is a minimal shift to the Lake Edith properties, but it is in the order of $643 under the 5-to-1 ratio and $1,300 on the 4.9-to-1 ratio, and that is for all of the properties in that class. So it is very minor, and it is just as a result of them being residential properties. So council can rest assured that under any of the alternatives that are here in the report, that the Lake Edith properties are essentially being held at status quo.
Thank you, Mr. Kiven. So before I call the question on the amendment, I wish to speak to it, and then I will invite Councillor Keller, her MP, to close debate. I speak in opposition to the motion to amend and in favor of the original motion. And I hear other councillors, and I accept parts of what others have said. It is a matter of principle. And I would be, in fact, prepared to ask residents to pay more if I was satisfied that that achieved a greater degree of equity. But we have not had that debate, and that is on us, and I acknowledge that. We have not had the debate about what is equitable. But we have proceeded in past on the basis that the visitors who come to our community, who sustain our economy, should pay some share of the cost, but we have no direct access to those visitors. The only thing we have is indirect access to those who are in business to serve the visitor. And so we have a tax rate split that attempts to achieve what we cannot do directly by getting those who can charge visitors pay a higher proportion, so that in fact we can conceive that the visitors are helping to pay for the services. And yes, 30% roughly of our budget goes to culture and recreation, but another 30% roughly goes to operations. And most of those operations, or a great deal of those operations, also serve almost exclusively the visitor population and are more extensive because of that. And the ones who can access the visitors and part them from their cash is the non-residential community, not the residential community. So I see a degree of equity in that solution. And although I am prepared to enter into the discussion about what is the right rate in terms of equity, I have not heard arguments that 4.9 is more equitable than 5.1. And it, in fact, distances us from our stated goal of getting visitors to contribute more to our local economy. And until we can achieve some mechanism to do that more directly, I am more inclined to stay with the tax rate split that we currently have. And a concluding comment, I just want to say that from my perspective, I cannot equate non-conforming with non-complying. We are in compliance with the legislation as a recognized non-conforming, and we see this at the local level. So we have encroachment agreements allowing people to take slightly more land than they're entitled to in various circumstances. We have what I still refer to as the Committee of Adjustments, but the Planning and Development Advisory Committee, which hears from leaseholders regularly saying, well, I know what the rules say, but I'd like to do something just a little bit different. And they become non-conforming, but it's still in compliance with the rules. So I take the position that by being non-conforming, we are in no way being non-compliant. And I simply would not accept that we should be or could be non-compliant, but we can be and we are non-conforming. But for those reasons, I am opposed to this motion. I won't repeat these arguments if we get to the stage of voting on a 5-1 rather than a 4.9, but my views will be the same. Councillor Kelleher MP, you are welcome to close debate, and then I'll call the question on the motion to amend.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland.
Well, that is oh, you're back with us?
Sorry, sorry, Mayor Ireland. I believe that we need to move forward. We need to support our chamber and our businesses. And I think it's such a slight amount of money that I think that we should vote in favor of moving forward this year.
Thank you, Councillor Kelleher MP. So I will call the question, and the question is to give second reading to bylaw number 236 as amended. And so that amendment would be to replace 5.1 to 1 with 4.9 to 1. All in favor? I cannot see a hand from Councillor Kelleher MP, but I'm going to take it that she is in favor of her motion. And I will call for those opposed. Thank you. 3 in favor, 4 opposed. That motion to amend is defeated. We are back to the main motion. Councillor Butler indicated that he wished to make a motion to go to 5-1. So I welcome that motion.
Thank you very much. And as promised, I will move to amend the tax rate bylaw to reflect a residential to non-residential ratio of, I should have put that the other way around, a non-residential to residential tax ratio of 5-1. And I have a couple of comments. The good news is I said already almost all of what I want to say whenever you're ready.
Yes, please proceed. You're welcome to open debate on this motion to amend.
I first want to say that I absolutely accept the point that, and have from the beginning, while we use different language, that non-conforming does not mean we are non-compliant. And in an earlier meeting, Mayor Ireland said that we are not out of line legally. Absolutely. I certainly am prepared to accept that this is a guideline, but one that I think, as I said, without good reason, we should conform to. I'm going to bring up another point. I understand that it is very difficult to know, well, what is the right ratio? And I don't pretend that I think 4.9 is the right ratio. But there are places that we can look for guidance. And one of those places is the provincial government has said that they view 5-1 as being a maximum ratio. So why would we argue to stay at 5.1? What is the compelling reason other than, well, it's what we've always done? And my entire problem with that is exactly that. Doing things the way we've always done them is not a good reason in municipal governments to continue doing them. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I don't like that kind of thinking. There's another guideline out there. It's worth pointing out that the provincial government mandates the ratio between commercial and non-commercial with respect to Alberta school taxes. There, the ratio is 1.6. The provincial government has decided that commercial leaseholders or owners should pay 1.6 times for school what residents do. So that's a guideline, certainly not one I'm suggesting we move to. The last thing I have to say about this is, you know, Jasper's residential tax rate is really low. Our rate is, sorry, what is it? It's 2.27. Here's some other communities' rates. Grand Prairie, 9.8. Edmonton, 7. Hinton, 5.45. St. Albert, an interesting city, because that city has eschewed industrial development and decided to rely on only residential and commercial taxes. Well, not only, but largely that is their strategy. St. Albert, 8.26. Interestingly, that's with a non-residential tax about the same as what ours would be if we went to 4.9. So they have a split, but residents pay for the services they receive. So again, for all the reasons I stated before, let's at least this year make the small token change of moving the ratio by 0.1. It's so little money, it's hardly worth talking about. And let's move it to 5 to 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Pardon me, Councillor Butler, Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Demota.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree that moving to 5.0 is, pretty minuscule, and it could just be a token. Yet there is still some confusion in my mind, at least, that if we move to 5.0, we can't move back up, and that's what I've in my understanding. That's what is once we're conforming, we can't be unconforming. Yet at 5.1, and I may be confused, but because we're non-conforming, we are playing outside of conformance, because last year during COVID, Banff increased to 6.3. So there was an increase. So I'm confused. I would get on board with the 5.0. The token reduction, I'm all for, but it's not a token reduction if there's the flexibility, as I suggested, to play outside of the conforming guidelines. I'm not 100% sure. Councillor Butler may be, but I don't think he is 100% sure, because how could Banff have increased? I apologize. I would get behind this, but I need more information. I need some time to feel it out, make sure that we're not restricting ourselves, and we're not giving up our flexibility. But then again, if it was a token reduction, I would get behind it immediately. Yet I'm not sure it is.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, first of all, I want to apologize if I confused conforming and compliance. That might have been my fault. Semantically, I should have been a little bit more conscious about that. So please forgive me if I skewed any understanding of what I was discussing. Anyway, as far as conforming goes, I think regardless if it's token or not, I think it's the right step in the right direction. We heard from the Economic Recovery Task Force that they recommend tax freeze, and although this would be a little different than a tax freeze, I think from the industry that's been affected the most in the community, and that does provide the lion's share for the operations of our services in the community that the residents get to benefit from. And and here's the other part of it. I really have struggled with the theme behind some people in the community referring this as residents versus business and vice versa, and it doesn't have to be that way. I think it's not a good way to look at what we're doing here. For me, I think it's a good tool to and best practice to be doing something that would be favorable, and in my opinion, for discussions in the future when we're looking at working with higher levels of government. And I think the cleaner our house is, the better presented we will be when we go and approach them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Wilson, I do see your hand. You have spoken to this motion, so I will defer first to any other councillor who wishes to speak. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'd like to express that though I will not support this motion today, I do recognize and appreciate
Sorry, we've lost audio again. Councillor McGrath.
Hello.
Yes, there you are. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for being patient with my audio today. I do agree that moving to 5.1 will likely be the direction that is in the future for the municipality of Jasper. And in the future, I will likely support this. Right now, I want to wait until we have things like alternate revenues in place and known alternate revenues in place, such as paid parking, where we can see what's coming into the municipality so that we can say to our residents, let's cushion this $28,000 difference with paid parking revenues. The intention for my opposition of this tax ratio today is just simply, as already stated, a principled decision that I do not wish to burden our residents with anything else at this point in time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With the consent of council, Councillor Wilson, you indicated a wish to speak again to the motion. That would be out of order technically, but in the absence of objection from councillors, I would allow that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my apologies, and I know I'm out of line. I just had one more note that I didn't speak to. It just dropped off my radar. But the provincial government has allowed us to operate non-conforming, and I think maybe for a reason. Like we've gone to the provincial government, or we've spoken to representatives, and we're lobbying for special treatment already. We're lobbying for resort status. Yet, doesn't this kind of mirror resort status? If we're wanting to be able to gain more revenue from our visitors, this is an opportunity to do so. And if we're giving that back and then going to them and asking, can we have more special treatment? We need more money to offer services for the visitors that are coming in droves. They're going to laugh at us, I would suspect. So I think we need to caution ourselves that giving back, even just a small token, and then going back to the provincial government to say, hey, no, we need more better treatment. We need unique treatment. We're special, but we've already, conformed, and we're not special anymore. I think it's premature. I'm not saying we don't do it, but I think it's premature, unfortunately. But thank you for letting me add that in.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. As I said earlier, I won't repeat all of my remarks that I made on the last motion, but I do want to thank Councillor Butler for raising the fact that Jasper does have quite an exceptionally low residential tax rate, and I think that is a point of pride. This is an expensive community in which to live. A low tax rate is one of the very few things that council can do to make our community, and particularly residential housing in this community, just slightly more affordable. And that is clearly one of our priorities. And so it has worked well. We can take pride in the fact that we do have a relatively low residential tax rate, which softens the cost of living in this community. And as we saw in the report from Community Futures West Yellowhead, delivered by Ms. Robbins earlier in the day, residents do feel the expense of living in this community. And so the less we can, or the more we can unburden them, and the more we can access cash from visitors to pay for services, I think the better for all. But that said, I won't repeat the arguments that I had earlier. Councillor Butler, I turn to you to close debate on this motion to amend.
Thank you. I've said everything I wanted to say on this, but I will take this opportunity to clarify the question of whether we could, if we stayed at 5.1 being a non-conforming, you could then increase our tax rate. And the Municipal Government Act says this. I do not want to get into details of interpreting the Municipal Government Act, but it's pretty clear. A non-conforming municipality shall not in any year have a tax ratio that is greater than the tax ratio is calculated in the most recently enacted property tax bylaw after May 31st, 2016. So if another community has increased that ratio, they did so in direct contravention as I read it, and I think that is the reading. So I don't think that there's much doubt that if we stay at 5.1, it does not mean that we could then go to 5.2. My understanding is pretty clear. I believe it is correct that we just couldn't go higher. So we do ourselves no harm relative to future flexibility by moving the rate now. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that has been clear in all of these conversations. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor Butler. That closes debate on this issue. I will call the question, and just for clarity, the question is to give second reading to bylaw number 236 as amended, with that amendment being to convert the 5.1 to 1 tax ratio split to 5.0 to 1. All in favor of that motion? And Councillor Kelleher MP, I can't lose you now. Those others may put their hands down. I know that Councillor Kelleher MP is struggling to vote. There, that is a hand up in favor. Thank you, Councillor Kelleher MP. Those opposed? There are 3 opposed, 4 in favor. That motion is carried. So we now have second reading of bylaw number 236 as amended with a 5.0 to 1 non-residential to residential tax rate split. Mr. Given, if you are there, my procedural question is, do we require a separate motion to give third reading at today's meeting, or can we move to third reading directly?
Your Worship, my recommendation would be that council does not need to have a motion to have third reading. The only time you require that is when you're attempting to have all 3 readings in the same council meeting. That's not the case, as first reading of the bylaw was given previously.
Yes. Thank you for that. All right, so I invite a member of council to make a motion to have council read for the third and final time bylaw number 236 as amended. Councillor Demota.
Well, I just had a point of order. At which part in the process does this go to Parks Canada for approval? I thought they had to approve before we do third. And do we have that?
They have pre-approved.
Sorry.
As Mr. Given explained earlier, they have pre-approved the bylaw, recognizing that they didn't know quite what the numbers were, but the numbers are inconsequential. The principle is the same. It's a tax rate bylaw that doesn't impact Parks Canada. So Mr. Given has assured us that we already have a certification for the bylaw and can move to third reading at today's meeting.
I apologize to everyone for missing that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Butler.
Sorry, Your Worship, I completely don't mean to be a stick in the mud, but it's a bylaw. And I want to make sure that nothing comes back to bite us, but didn't we vote on the amendment there? And don't we need to now give the bylaw second reading with the 5-0 ratio? I have no stake in that, but I just want to make sure we're on side and actually giving it 3 readings, so nothing comes back.
Thank you for that, Councillor Butler. A fair question. My interpretation had been that Councillor Wilson initially made a motion to give second reading to the bylaw that received first reading. There were two amendments, but the successful amendment was to amend that motion to give second reading with an amendment to the bylaw. So my interpretation, but I will certainly defer to what Mr. Given might have to say, but I think we voted on second reading as amended, which that was my interpretation. Mr. Given, do you believe that we are on side in terms of bylaw process?
So we had a motion for second reading, a motion to amend second reading, which failed, a second motion to amend second reading, which passed. I believe, Your Worship, we do need to have a vote on second reading itself before council can move on to third reading.
Thank you for that. And thank you then, Councillor Butler, for astutely picking that up. So then, do we have a motion to give second reading to bylaw number 236 as amended? Councillor Journeau, you're making that motion? Right. I am going to briefly call for debate, although I think that we have debated it out. Is there anything anyone else wishes to contribute? All right, I will call the question. This is second reading of bylaw number 236 as amended. All in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. There are two opposed. And then we can go to third reading, if there is a motion to give third reading to bylaw number 236 as amended. Councillor Kelleher-Empey. All right, again, I'm going to assume that there is not a need for further debates. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? There are two opposed. That is carried. Thank you all for that. That takes us to Code of Conduct. It is now 12:32. We've been at this for 3 hours. We have two substantive bylaws to deal with. We could get through those. What is the will of council? Do you want to push through and see where we're at? Defer a lunch break for perhaps an hour and see whether we can get done? Councillor Journeau indicates that he is amenable. I see some other nodding of heads. All right, we will carry on. My apologies to staff who are relegated to continue with us, but that is the will of council. So I will turn to agenda item 8.3, the Code of Conduct for Elected Officials bylaw, here for second reading. Is there any further debate about this bylaw? If there is not, I will just mention as a bit of an aside and try and do so briefly that through my involvement on the Municipal Governance Committee of AUMA, we have been asked to respond to a question from the province as to whether or not they should now scrap mandatory code of conduct bylaws entirely. So after all of the effort that we have put into this, as have other councils across the province, there is some indication that they may be changing course. In any event, I have responded to that, saying it hardly seems the time to do so after having had so many councils invest so much into this. But we shall see. We don't know. We have done this work, so it is here for second reading if someone is prepared to make a motion that we give this bylaw second reading today. Councillor McGrath.
Yes, I'd gladly make that motion.
All right, is there any debate required on the question? Councillor Butler?
Only this, your worship, I am in favor entirely of the contents of the bylaw. It's just an interesting question that you have raised, because from the beginning, I thought it odd when the provincial government required that a code of conduct be put inside of a bylaw. As a general principle, as I understand it, matters directly relating to staff and council behavior or actions are usually housed within policy, and bylaw directs behavior and so on of others. In that a bylaw is enforceable, for example, by the bylaw department, where this is really only enforceable by council. So it's an interesting distinction. Had that not been a direction, I would have been far happier to see the code of conduct sitting in a policy, because a policy is much easier to amend. If the next council wants to have a look at the policy, they can do so by motion without the drama involved in multiple readings of a bylaw. I don't suggest we go a different direction now, but it's a point worth making. I think that there may be some method in the madness of walking that back from a bylaw requirement to perhaps just a policy requirement. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. And the whole issue, I think, at the provincial level now is whether or not it should be mandatory. It could still be voluntary, and so if the law changes, we could simply convert all of this hard effort into our own policy in any event. So we have the motion from Councillor McGrath to give second reading to bylaw number 235, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to establish a code of conduct for members of council. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 8.4, rotation of ballots, bylaw 2021. Here for first reading, and Mr. Given, I will turn to you, but perhaps Ms. Nadon wishes to speak to this, but I threw you to her as you choose.
Yes, Your Worship, absolutely will be very brief. Councillor, we're heading into the municipal election. There are a few items where a bylaw is required in order to enable specific options under the legislation. This is a recommendation for a bylaw to allow for the printing of ballots in the election and to allow for the rotations of names. I don't know if Ms. Nadon wanted to add anything additional, but it is essentially a housekeeping item to enact some of the recommendations that council previously saw and approved of.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Is there a need for questions from councillors? If not, this is a matter that has been put in place for previous elections. You may have noted, in fact, at the last election, the rotation of ballots. I guess, though, you would only see the one that was before you, so you wouldn't know what was on other ones, but we have rotated names traditionally on the ballots. Is there anything you wish to add, Ms. Nadon? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're presenting this today for first reading. My only other comment would be if council wishes to expedite this process, we could do first and second reading today, if you're amenable to that, and then it would allow us to go get certification and come back only once more to council for final approval. But otherwise, it is much like a housekeeping item, as Mr. Given outlined.
Thank you for that, Mr. Don. I would certainly be amenable to two readings. Councillor Trudeau.
I'd be prepared to make the motion that we proceed with first and second reading of the bylaw to allow for the rotation of names on the ballot.
Thank you, Councillor Jernot. We can only proceed with one at a time, but that is a motion for first reading. Is there any debate? I see nothing. I will call the question. All those in favor of presenting first reading of bylaw number 237? There are none opposed. Thank you. That is carried. And Councillor Keller-Hempy, I see your hand up, although maybe that's from the vote because you seem to be frozen. Councillor Jernot, did you wish to make a motion for second reading?
Yes, I'd be prepared to be pleased to do that to expedite this process for administration. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I'll put the question, all those in favor of providing second reading to bylaw number 237. There are none opposed. That is carried. And do we then have just a decision to be made with respect to special ballots? Ms. Nadon?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So this is going on to the next agenda item. So there is a request for decision on the agenda. And there are actually 3 separate motions that we are looking for today from council. And to your point, the special ballots bylaw is quite detailed and presented in that report. And following some input last week, I did go back to the act and made sure that we were using exact wording and being very compliant. And I must say, improved our motions from last time, which I was pleased with reviewing and ensuring. So namely, the institutional vote it's actually about council allowing the returning officer to designate the location of a voting station as opposed to allowing an institutional vote. So small tweaks in wording were made to the report, but the motions as they are presented before you in the report on the following item is what we're looking for today. And if council is good with the wording that's presented in there, I think, especially for the first one on special ballots, reading that first bullet and suggesting that as presented is what council is voting on would be a good alternative. And then, so we are looking for 3 separate motions on the 3 bullets that are in that report.
Thank you for that, Mr. Don. Taking them in order then, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion that council provide for special ballots for the 2021 municipal election? Councillor Butler? If there is a need to speak, I will just look for hands. I see no one indicating a need to speak, so I will call the question on that motion. I won't reread it, but the motion as indicated on the list of recommendations on the penultimate page of our 74-page agenda. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. The next matter is that council provide for holding an advance vote for the 2021 municipal election pursuant to the Local Authorities Election Act. Is there a councillor prepared to make that motion? Councillor McGrath, thank you. I see no hands to debate, so I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And finally, the councillor could signify that they are prepared to make a motion that council authorize the returning officer to designate the location of 1 or more institutional voting stations for the 2021 municipal election pursuant to the Local Authorities Election Act. Councillor Demota, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Nadon, for bringing forward that housekeeping issue, and we can look then to 3rd reading of the vote for the bylaw for rotation of ballots after certification is obtained from Parks Canada. That takes us to agenda item 9, request for decision. And we have the wastewater treatment plant contract ratification. Mr. Given.
Your worship, I think we may have had an item before we get to the wastewater treatment plant, although we're progressing well. I think we still have to go through the council remuneration recommendation that was at committee previously, that the council compensation and benefit structure amounts for the 2021 to 2025 council be set. Basically, administration's recommendation is that they be kept at the level consistent with the current policy and subject to the annual CPI increases is the only change that would happen for the next council term.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Given. We do have that, but it is indicated as agenda item 9.3 on my agenda. So we won't miss it. We haven't missed it. We could jump ahead now that you've raised it. It makes no difference to me, but it is on the agenda in a different order.
Thanks, Your Worship. I appreciate that. Now, now that I go to the cover sheet, I see that it is in a different order. And so we can work with the wastewater treatment plant recommendation. Council heard from Aquaterra Utilities and had an opportunity to ask a question. In the package, you'll see the process that the municipality went through. I know that council is very well aware of the process that we went through in terms of the RFP for the operation of the wastewater treatment plant and the evaluation of the submissions. And I know the council is keenly aware that we're headed towards a transition from the current interim operator for July 1st. In the package, you will see, and there was some discussion last week about the efforts that administration is undertaking to ensure that there is appropriate oversight of the operator. And to that point, administration has included in the contract a number of key accountabilities and key performance indicators that we'll measure with the contractor on a regular basis. The recommendation for a contract is for a 10-year term, and that there is a midterm review in addition to annual reviews of the regular operations. The contractor does have an ability to earn a bonus if they meet all of their obligations throughout the course of the term. And the annual amount of the contract is just under $600,000, I'll say, $564,824.74 plus GST. This contract is subject to annual CPI increases. And again, that potential performance bonus if the contractor stays in conformance with the standards that the municipality has set. This is here for council's approval, and I believe council members were circulated the detailed contract for your review. Appreciate it is a pretty significant contract in terms of the level of complexity. So council members were provided that ahead of time, and administration's recommendation is that council approve the 10-year operating contract with Aquaterra Utilities effective June 1st with a transition to, from full-time operation of the interim operator to be effective July 1st, 2021.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Would you like the motion before questions or comments? If so, I'm prepared to make the motion.
I can take it either way. If you have questions of administration that are independent of the motion or allow you to make
I'll go ahead and make the motion because my question, I have a question and comment, but it wouldn't affect my vote. So I will move then that council approve a 10-year operating contract with Aquaterra Utilities for the operation of the Jasper Wastewater Treatment Plant effective June 1st, 2021, with a transition of full-time operation from the interim operator dated July 1st, 2021. I guess I probably didn't need to read all of that, but I just did.
It is appreciated having it read onto the record in any event, but you did have a question, so go ahead.
Sure, a comment and then a question. I am more than happy to make that motion because I want to communicate to the community broadly that a tremendous amount of work went into what Mr. Given has rightly pointed out is, if not the most significant, certainly one of the very most significant contracts. Well, surely it is the most significant contract that this community enters into. It is worth over years. It is worth millions of dollars, and represents also the management of even more millions of dollars in capital spending, which is not written into the contract, but this company will be managing for that. I was very happy with what we heard today from Aquaterra. And I want to just congratulate and thank administration for the work on this, also for an extremely well prepared request for decision. There's always some nuancing necessary in determining what should go in the RFD that is for public consumption, because some of the details of the contract may not be appropriate for public consumption. And so I'm really happy with that and the robustness, is that even a word, of the process to get us here. I have one question, and it arrives in my mind from the Aquaterra presentation, where we learned that Aquaterra is co-owned by 4 municipal shareholders. And I just wonder, Mr. Given, and it doesn't affect my vote, is there any potential, should the community see the benefit, to convert this contract within the 10-year term to a shareholder situation, or would that conversation now have to wait until the expiration of this contract after 10 years? And as I say, I'm not moved either way. I'm just interested to know the answer to that question.
Your Worship, to Councillor Butler's question, there is nothing that precludes Council from exploring that opportunity at any time. The contract does have the ability for it to be discontinued on the agreement of both parties. And so if Council decided that they wish to seek a different arrangement, then that would certainly be, Council would have that flexibility. And I just would say, I guess, additionally, the contract also has the ability for either party to end the agreement subject to certain conditions. And so if the municipality was dissatisfied with the service of the contractor, the municipality would have the ability to end the contract under certain terms. If the contractor was dissatisfied with the municipality's adherence to certain requirements for investments in the facility that could impact its operations, then there is an out clause, if you will, for the operator as well. But really, to your question, if Council wished to explore the alternative or the option of becoming a shareholder in the corporation, and if the corporation was interested in that, both parties could agree to discontinue this contract.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you both. Any further debate regarding the motion? And that is the motion to ratify the contract. Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And Mr. Given, I joined Councillor Butler in commending you and administration for the really thorough work in getting us to this point, and thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 9.2, municipal election.
Your Worship, I think this may be where my confusion came from. I think we dealt with this in those 3 motions where Ms. Nadon presented previously. So this is the middle item where we have had the numbers transposed from the front of the agenda to the back and the delivery of the report. So I think actually now we are on finally where I was trying to get to for council remuneration. I'm finally turned out to be correct where the mayor was correct in the first instance.
All right, we will then proceed with agenda item 9.3, council remuneration. And this has been presented in past, nothing to add. I take it, Mr. Given. Right, anything from any councillors? We appear to have lost Councillor Keller-Herranti. but we certainly have quorum and can proceed. And so do we have a motion, Councillor McGrath?
Thanks, Mayor Ireland. I'd like to move that council approve the current council compensation and benefit structure and amounts for the 2021 to 2025 council, subject to annual consumer price index increases.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor McGrath. Any debate on that motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? I'm sorry, Councillor Butler, were you trying to get a point in there? Point of order, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. Is it possible that the wording here implies that we have set the council remuneration package for the next 4 years, for the 4 years of the next council? And is that what we mean to do? I think we're setting it for the next year. I don't think it's in our power to set it for the next 4 years. And I just suddenly, on the fly, found a moment of disparity.
Thank you. Mr. Given, go ahead.
Your worship, to Councillor Butler, this recommendation would set the council pay for the next 4 years. According to our council policy, there's intended to be a once every 4 years review. This would be that review, and council would be setting it for the next 4 years, subject to, as allowed under the policy, annual adjustments based on CPI. So if the Alberta Consumer Price Index increases, then council salaries would increase along with that on an annual basis. But I suppose, theoretically, the next council could choose to change the policy. So for the next council to address its own salaries, they would have to change our current municipal policy on council remuneration and then enact a new policy and make a change. And I'm sure that would be subject to some discussion in the community.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. Not quite what I thought we were doing, but I take the point around the policy issue. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, and just to provide a little bit more clarity on my positioning behind it, and it mostly aligns with the concept that Mayor Ireland referred to, in the sense that I don't feel comfortable, and I don't think the council of the day should be giving themselves increases if that's what it's deemed, or, you know, I mean, we can always decrease our salaries, but I've never been comfortable with that, and I don't think it's appropriate for the current councillors to enter debate on that. So I'm very comfortable in setting up the next 4 years, and like Mr. Given said, if things do change, council does have a right to review the policy. Thank you.
Subject to those questions, and because there might be a lack of clarity, I will recall the question. I never did quite have confidence that I saw all the hands in any event. So I will again call the question, and I will say, just speaking to the motion, that my intent in voting in favor is that we are setting an amount for an incoming council. What the incoming council chooses to do is up to the incoming council, and they have access to all of the policy changes that they would ever wish to make. So I will call the question again. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to correspondence for information, consideration, or action. There is nothing on our agenda today. There might be some material that has been received since the agenda was published, but that will come forward if appropriate on a subsequent agenda. If there is nothing else to be brought to council's attention, we can move to agenda item 11, other new business. Is there any other new business to raise with council? Seeing nothing from anyone else, I will reiterate, I'm sorry, Councillor Demota, go ahead.
Well, I saw first that Mr. Given had removed his mute on there. I'm not sure if you wanted to say anything. Okay, I don't want to bring it up as new business today, but perhaps add to the next committee of the whole discussion, since we were talking about policies and reviewing of policies. I would like to bring up our public consultation policy for discussion, and whether committee of the whole would recommend that to go to the legislative committee. I think that that's just another housekeeping matter that I'd like to have cleaned up so that we can be conforming with what the province has asked from us, and maybe be in compliance. So I would just like to review that as for discussion. I don't know if we need to have the whole policy on the table, but I would like to have that just to something to clean up before September. If council is good with that.
Thank you for that. Mr. Given, go ahead.
Your worship, just to give council a little bit of a view of what's going on within administration, we are at a point where we're, I believe, either next week or the week after, bringing forward a recommendation on how to start to regular review of all of our council policies. We certainly can take the advisement if there's an intention here that the public engagement policy should be one of those priority ones. We can identify that in our recommendations that are going to come forward, because as council remember, there was already direction given to administration to bring forward a process for reviewing all of our policies. We are in the process right now of struggling with which one should come first. We had already heard that there was a discussion about fiscal controls, and so that certainly will be near the top of the priority list when we bring it forward to you for a recommendation. And we can also identify the desire to have the public engagement policy as one of the priority items in that. But I guess my request would be that council allow administration to come forward with our recommendation on how to do the review of all of our policies, and then council can set the relative priority of where we start with those. And I think that would allow Councillor Demota to raise this issue of the public engagement policy.
Thank you for that.
I really appreciate that, and yeah, and I don't want to suggest any over prioritization of one over the other, and I think that I appreciate the process, and if we do have a committee that was put in place to deal with such things, and if there could be any assistance on our behalf. I can't speak for the other two members on the legislative committee, but I'm willing to put a little bit of work in to review and to assist in any of the background work that needs to be done. So if that's within our duty and our capabilities, then I would like to move forward on that at one point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As I indicated to council and to administration late last evening, I wish to raise two matters of new business, one by way of notice of motion. So by motion 212, we instituted under our conduct in public places bylaw a requirement for masking essentially in the downtown core, on sidewalks in the downtown core, at least some sidewalks. And then by motion number 326, we expanded that to include sidewalks adjacent to hotels in the community. Since the province is moving forward rather rapidly with its open for summer plan and has postulated that there might be stage 3 achieved by the end of this month, we only have one more meeting to deal with some of these so that we can coordinate our local efforts with provincial efforts. So by way of notice of motion, I ask that, or I just give notice that on June 15th, I will put forward a motion that council rescind those two motions, being 212 and 326, with that rescission to be effective on whatever date the province moves to stage 3 of its open for summer plan. And then they would continue so long as we remain at stage 3, recognizing that nothing is certain and maybe we will wobble back to stage 2 at some time. We hope not, but that's the nature of that motion, and it can be discussed certainly next week at Committee of the Whole. And then I propose that it come forward as a motion for a decision or debate and decision on June 15th. And so I would just leave that as information. The other one, however, I felt a need to bring forward a motion to direct administration. And so in order to make a motion, I will cede the chair to Deputy Mayor McGrath. And the motion that I wish to make is that Council direct administration to present to Council for first, second, and potentially third reading at the June 15th, 2021 regular meeting, a draft bylaw to repeal the temporary compulsory face coverings bylaw number 228 and amendments thereto, with that repeal to be effective again on the date that the province moves to stage 3 of its open for summer plan. That is my motion. I don't need to speak to it much again. It is just direction to come forward with a bylaw to repeal the existing bylaw. I just don't want our community to be in a position where the province is ahead of us in terms of rescinding restrictions, and we are left in a position where we still have what would be an indoor masking bylaw when provincial restrictions have been removed and we have limited time. So I bring it forward. We could, in fact, if we chose on the 15th, simply repeal it on that day, because the field is already covered, not exactly in the same way, but there will still be indoor masking requirements until we reach stage 3 anyway. So it need not be contingent on a later date, but I want to get that bylaw before us as soon as possible. And given the nature of our relationship with Parks Canada, if it's possible to get sort of a certification in hand so that we could do all 3 readings on that one day, that would be most beneficial. So that is my motion, and I have spoken to the motion. So I turn the chair back to you, Deputy Mayor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, for your motion, and thank you for opening debate on your motion. Are there any questions or is there debate from Council? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you, Mayor Ireland, for your foresight in getting this in front of us in time. Otherwise, we could have been in a time crunch, probably having to call a special meeting and all of that stuff, which we've seen in the past of necessity when it comes to these kind of bylaws. So I appreciate it. I don't often like to see things come on the agenda under other new business unless there's a time constraint and it is in fact notice for upcoming consideration, and that is both of these. So I appreciate you getting that in front of us very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any other questions or debate from Council? Perfect. And I join Councillor Butler in thanking you for your foresight, Mayor Ireland, in having this before us today. I will call the question. Is there any need to have the motion explained once again? Great. Thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried. There are none opposed.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McGrath. We can move to agenda item 12, Councillor reports. Are there any reports? Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Keller MP and I attended Community Futures monthly meeting last Thursday. Just wanted to update Council that June 23rd, we have a strat plan meeting up in Grand Cache. And also Mayor and Councillor are invited to the AGM, which is June 24th by Zoom. And so we'll send out the link on that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor McGrath.
I attended the community conversation last week and I will be there again tomorrow.
Thank you for that. Any other reports? Councillor Journeau?
I will be participating in a Zoom meeting for the annual general meeting of the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway on June the 11th. It's a Friday. It's been difficult to try and arrange that meeting because the organization has many challenges, especially due to COVID. We've lost members, so it'd be a challenging year. So looking forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. Other reports? Just for confirmation, I attended a West Yellowhead Regional Management Authority Board meeting last week, and if I recall correctly, I think I sent out an email for discussion at our next committee of the whole meeting. There are some developments there that we should discuss, but I need not report further on that. That will come back next week. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, tomorrow I've registered for a board development program. It's something that we've engaged. We've been engaged in through the Culture and Rec Board. And the topic this week is going to be building strong teams and effective relationships. I've found that this development program really beneficial. I'm not sure so much for board structure, but down the road, I would highly recommend this for new councillors to understand board organizations. And I do believe that a lot of this translates over to council duties and structure. So it's always good to enhance your background. And I recommend that if anyone's available to try to attend this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. If there is nothing else, then we can move to agenda item 13, upcoming events, Lemonade Day. Councillor Keller-Harampe has alerted us to that. Are there any other upcoming events should be brought to the attention of council? All right, well, thank you. Today, of course, the first day of stage 1 of the Open for Summer plan. So I, for one, will make every effort to attend an outdoor patio somewhere in the community later today and show support, visible support for our tourism economy and our business operators. And with that, I would invite a motion to adjourn. Councillor Demota, thank you. Motion to adjourn at 1:12, well short of our 4-hour maximum. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Given and staff, and thank you to all those members of the public who attended. It was a very full agenda today. Lots of excellent information for the community. So thank you all for those who endured all 3 hours and 42 minutes of it. Very much appreciated. Good day to everyone.
Thanks, everyone.